Hello and welcome to the 2017 Actual Tech Media Enterprise Storage Megacast event. On today's event, we're excited to be joined by Unitrends, Cohesity, Nutanix, Clear Sky Data, Igneous, Veeam with IBM, and Scale Computing. My name is David Davis, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. I'm a 9-time VMware expert. I've been in the industry a long time, writing, blogging, speaking about all things enterprise technology. And we at Actual Tech Media felt really passionate about enterprise technology solutions, especially enterprise storage. And that's a big part of why we created this event series, the Megacast event series, as well as the EcoCast event series, to help educate the world of IT professionals about the most innovative enterprise technology and the enterprise technology solutions available to you today. The goal of this event is to help you to learn as much as possible, in this case about enterprise storage, get all your questions answered from the many experts that we'll have on the event today, and do it as efficiently as possible, all in one online virtual event. You don't have to travel to any conference. You can do it from your desk. You can do it from your home office, whatever it might be. And while you're learning, you have the chance to win one of our many very valuable prizes on the event today, which I'll talk about in just a moment. Now, before we jump into it, I want to first do a little welcome housekeeping here. So there's a few things you need to know about the event. I mentioned prizes. I'll be announcing the winners of the prizes in the Q&A box there on your console, as well as verbally. I'll say the name and the state or location of the prize winner, and then we'll be announcing the prize winners on Twitter as well. I'll talk more about prizes in just a moment. Now, each of the presenters today will be speaking for roughly 20 minutes. At the end of each of those 20-minute sessions, we'll be doing roughly a 3 to 5 minute live Q&A. So we welcome your questions. We want this to be a very educational event. We want you to ask as many questions as you want. We'll be doing our best to answer the flood of questions that we typically get on these events. We also have some poll questions for you, the audience. So we'll be asking you a few questions throughout the event, and I'll share most of the responses from the audience for those questions with you. I want to point out that this is not a competition between any of the presenters today. There's no winner being selected today. Again, this is an educational event for you, the audience. We've asked the presenters to stay positive and to highlight what makes their product or their solution unique in the industry, and to focus on what problems that it solves. Now, I want to mention social media. We'll be tweeting about the event over on Twitter with the hashtag StorageMegacast. And if you use the Twitter icon there in your console, it will actually append that hashtag automatically to anything that you tweet. So you don't have to go over to your Twitter client. You don't have to jump over to your phone or whatever. You can tweet directly from the console. You can also share the console. You can also share the event using the email icon there. You can email the event to friends, colleagues, whatever you'd like to do. Let's see, what else about the console? I encourage you to maximize the presentation window there, the slide window, to make it larger. That's something that you can do right now. That way when the presenters play videos or they do a live screen share or they share an architectural diagram, you'll be able to see those windows or those slides much, much better. Also, if at any point during the presentation you have trouble, 9 times out of 10, a refresh on your web browser will fix any problems that you do encounter. And then also on your console there, we have a number of handouts. We have a handout from each of the different presenters today that they hand-selected to help you learn more about the solution that they'll be presenting on. So you can just click and download any of those handouts. They're all in PDF form. All right. Looks like that's all the housekeeping on this slide. I want to talk for a moment about prizes. So the requirements to be eligible for the prize drawings that we're doing today are that you must be present on the live Megacast to be eligible for the drawing. The winners will have the option to make a donation to a selected charity. I'll talk more about charities in just a moment. If you have questions about the legal prize terms and conditions, exactly who is qualified, you can visit actualtechmedia.com/mc-prize-terms-conditions, or if you just go to actualtechmedia.com, scroll all the way to the bottom of the page, you'll find a link there that will take you to that page where you can read all the legalese if you choose to do so. Now, on the screen there, I have our 5 grand prizes that we'll be giving out today. They are 5 Amazon $1,500 gift cards. Those are the grand prizes. But wait, there's more, as they say. We also have 7 Amazon $500 gift cards to give out. So a total of 12 gift cards, 5 of them being $1,500, 7 of them being $500. So tons of prize happening, tons of prize giveaways on the event today. All right. So about charity, we love to give money away to charity. We give out a lot of prize values to charity. We've hand-selected a number of charities that you see on the screen there. If you would like to give out any of your prize value to a charity, we would be glad to help you do that. We've got some great charities, and I'm proud to say that we've given out a lot of prize money to charities thanks to very generous prize winners here on the Megacast event series. Now, I mentioned social media. I am David M. Davis on Twitter. You can follow me there. The event today is produced by Actual Tech Media. You can follow us as well. We'll be tweeting about the event. And the event hashtag, again, is Storage Megacast. All right, so before we jump into it with our first presenter of the day, that is Unitrends, I have a little state of modern storage from my perspective. David Davis of Actual Tech Media. I was a former IT manager. I managed a SAN array. We had to upgrade our SAN. We had to replace our SAN. I've been through all of those storage capacity and performance and purchasing challenges. So I do have some personal experience in this area. And we've also done a lot of survey work over the years at Actual Tech Media, talking to our audience, such as yourself out there, about their storage challenges. So my take on the state of modern storage today is that most enterprises are facing a real storage dilemma. Storage demands are growing faster than storage capacity and performance can keep up. And I've got a graph here in just a second to show you to back that up. There's tons of new technologies available, but the landscape is confusing. We'll be talking about many of those new technologies on the event today. There's so many different storage solutions available, and I know as an IT professional, it can be very confusing, which storage solution is best for me? How do I choose the right storage solution for my company, for my, type of application, and for my needs? And as soon as you learn about one storage technology, there's another, technology out there on the horizon, around the corner. How do you make the best business decision for your company's future? It's a real dilemma that so many people out there, such as yourselves, are facing. Now, when it comes to new enterprise storage technology, there's many different solutions available. There's hybrid storage that's in all-flash storage that's overtaking traditional spinning disk storage. There's software-defined storage out there that's rapidly being adopted that has its own unique benefits. Hyper-converged storage is a solid option for the data center. And then there's also cloud storage that's maturing, and it has great use cases for the enterprise. So lots of different storage technologies. When it comes to storage services, those are now really the norm, just the expectation that you have data reduction, that you have security, replication, snapshots, some sort of cloud integration. All these things are just kind of to be expected from today's modern storage solutions, and we'll be talking about many of those on the event. Now, when it comes to the annual data outlook, we at Actual Tech Media did a survey of our audience, and in general, I've heard out there in the industry that most companies are seeing a 40% growth in their storage capacity requirements year over year. And so it's a crazy increase. What we found is that, as much as 1.2% of the audience that we surveyed, we're seeing a 70% growth in their storage. Maybe one person was even at 100%, but most companies were down kind of in that 40% to 20% range. So that's kind of the data growth outlook. And then we also found that when we asked IT professionals about the future state of their storage, when it comes to hyperconverged infrastructure, software-defined storage, flash storage, hybrid storage, and their existing disk-based storage, what their plans were for these technologies in their data center, over the next year. And what the results were was that 1 out of 5 are planning to decommission their disk-based storage, and 40% of those polled said they were going to be adopting hybrid storage, or they were going to be adding to their existing hybrid storage. And then roughly 30 to 40% were also adding to their hyperconverged storage, their software-defined storage, as well as their all-flash storage solutions. So lots of disk-based storage that's being decommissioned, and a lot of new technologies being adopted in the data center. Now, on today's enterprise storage event, you'll learn about the most innovative storage solutions that are available to you today. I've seen the slide presentations for the event today and some of the demos, and I can tell you we've got some really innovative, really cool stuff. You'll learn about the problems that these storage solutions solve and exactly how they solve them. You'll see live demos in many cases, and you'll learn what makes each storage solution unique. So I'm really excited about today's event. We have Unitrends, Cohesity, Nutanix, Igneous, Veeam presenting with IBM, Clear Sky Data, and Scale Computing. So 7 solutions back to back. Now, before we jump into it, I've got 3 quick poll questions that I want to ask you here. So you answer the poll questions just right there in the slide area. Just click on the button that corresponds to you at your company. And the first question is, how many people work in your company? So basically the number of employees in your company. If you don't mind answering that question, I will share the results of that with you here in just a second, and you can see how you compare to your peers that are on the Enterprise Storage Megacast today. So I'll give you just a moment to answer that question. All right, so hopefully you've answered that. Let me share the results of that with you. And it looks like 22% are 100 to 500 employees, 20% are 10,000 plus employees, and then all the way at the opposite end of the spectrum, 6.9% are 0 to 25 employees at their company. Thank you for answering that question. Let me ask you another one. So this one is, what's your industry vertical? And you may need to use the bar on the right-hand side to scroll down the screen, the scroll bar on the right-hand side to find your industry vertical, because the list is rather lengthy. As you might guess, there's a number of industry verticals out there. So I'll give you a moment to answer that question as well, and then I'll share the results. All right, let me share the results of that with you. And as I said, the list is long, but 6.5% are state or federal government, 7% retail, 11% healthcare, 18% technology, 11% manufacturing, 7% banking and finance. So a good mix of companies represented on the event today. Thank you for answering that. And one last question before we get started, and that is, how large is your IT staff? All right, hopefully you've answered that. Let me share the results of that with you. And it looks like 7% are just one-person shops, 23% have 2 to 5 people, all the way up to 27% that have more than 100 people, and there's a real good mix of IT shops in between. So thank you for answering those questions. And with that, I'm excited to kick off the Enterprise Storage Megacast with our first presenter, Mr. Tommy Fan. He's a sales engineer at Unitrends. Tommy, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good morning.
Thanks for being on. Take it away.
Thank you. Hey, good morning, everyone. My name's Tommy, and I'm with Unitrends. Today we want to talk about backup and DR. If this is your first time hearing about Unitrends, we've been around for almost 30 years doing backup in DR, and we have data centers worldwide. We have thousands of customers, and we like to bring in a solution that is very simplistic. In that sense, we like to go into an environment and consolidate your stack of products. So if you're doing backups today that are manual, that requires third-party storage, third-party software, tape, even a cloud provider, we want to really consolidate all that to a single provider solution. Okay. Now, one of the two ways we deploy it is with a purpose-built backup appliance. So one of these boxes here you see on the screen, this is going to be your backup server, your software, your storage, all built into one. And it's a very scalable solution as well, right? You can have one box, you can have 1,000 boxes in your rack, and we can back up and distribute your data across multiple units. Now, as you can see, some of these units here, we have small units, about 2 terabytes for your small offices or branch offices, and we have some larger appliances for your enterprise, your data centers that we're protecting. Okay? These also come with 10 gigabit if you're on 10 gigabit connections, SSDs for caching, and if we look at the next screen here, one of the really nice things about these appliances is the licensing. We make licensing very simple. You don't have to worry about what you're backing up, how many servers or sockets or application. It's an all-you-can-eat, no-limits licensing model. So if we recommend 200 terabyte storage or 300 terabyte of storage, that's really all you have to worry about when you're out of space. Now, if you already have hardware around, maybe you've already made that initial investment into a NAS or a SAN for backup, that's okay. We can deploy the Unitrends virtual appliance as a software and back up to your existing hardware. But you know what? It's the same technology underneath. So whether you go with one or the other, we have no preference, and you'll get the benefits of both worlds here. Okay. Now, let's take a look at what a typical deployment looks like. So starting here with an appliance or software, you're going to deploy that locally, and we're going to be able to back up everything in your environment. And by everything, I'm talking about your physical servers, your desktops, your laptops. Of course, everybody's virtualized today, so we can do VMware, we can do Hyper-V, we can do Xen, we can do Acropolis. We can snapshot those VMs. Okay? If you have NASes, we can back those up directly. But most importantly, our applications, right? Everybody has databases. We're talking about Microsoft SQL, SharePoint, Exchange, Oracle, so on and so forth. We can back up all that. Okay? And of course, some of the important features that we're going to includes compression, deduplication, WAN optimized replication. Okay, so those things will be part of it. Now, earlier I saw, you get a lot of you guys are in mixed industries, different verticals. You may have different data requirements, and by data requirement, I'm talking about retention. Some people keep data for 30 days. Some people keep it for 7 years, and in between, right? So we give you one of the most flexible options when it comes to archiving. You can archive to NASes, SAN, external hard drive, tape, or even a cloud of your choice. So if you've already have that contract with AWS or Azure, that's okay. We can certainly hook on to those providers and then archive your data to it. Last but not least here is replication. And with replication, this is how we're going to get your data offsite much faster. We're not taking tapes offsite. We don't have to take external hard drives offsite each day or each month. We can replicate it in real time. Okay? And this can be done two ways. Kind of back to the solution, with one throat to choke or having one provider, we can be also your cloud platform. And by that, I mean we can get your data offsite. We can give you a custom cloud retention. So that means a minimum of 90 days, a year, 7 years, indefinite years, right? And we can also spin up your servers in the cloud. If you're a company today where you only have one data center, one office, and maybe you lost power or you had a disaster, where are you going to spin up your business? So we can certainly take all your servers, your VMs, replicate it to the Unitrends cloud, and spin it up in the event of a disaster. If you're living in the States, especially during hurricane seasons or tornado season, you're going to lose power. And we've had in the past where customers fell over into the Unitrends cloud because they lost power. And when they're ready to fail over back, we can go ahead and send the data backwards, replicate your data, and all your changes back to your local site. And of course, we don't do just spin up. We can also do testing. So if you have to audit your DR set, your backups, so we do DR testing and reporting for you as well. So that's the Unitrends cloud platform. Now, the other option we have is the private cloud. And by private cloud, we're talking about having a site-to-site replication. So, if you have a company with multiple data centers, you have branch offices, you can deploy multiple boxes, multiple software here, and replicate between your sites. You can do many-to-one, you can do one-to-one. This way, you're leaning on each data center to fail over the other site. Okay? So we have some deployments out there with 2 sites or 20 sites or 2,000 sites. Very flexible, very easy to deploy. And our cloud is very secured and comprehensive. So if you're spinning up your data center in our cloud, we can provide all the certifications 24/7. We can seed the data back and forth, and we'll give you all the necessary things to fail over into: public IP addresses, VPN connections, site-to-site tunnel. Okay? And if you like free hardware, we have some promotions going on that's very attractive. We can sign you up on a contract, get you some cloud services, and give you the hardware for free. You don't have to worry about any capital expenditures. Just go ahead and look at how much cloud storage you need in offsite. For Office 365, a lot of people are moving their email, their SharePoint offsite with Office 365. So we can do some unique backups for Office 365s as well. So depending on what contract you have with Microsoft, you may have some limitation with retention or security, right? So we want to be able to go in and actually provide additional value to your cloud services. So with Unitrends backup for Office 365, we can give you infinite retention, unlimited retention here. Your data is still going to be secured in Microsoft Cloud. We do multiple snapshots throughout the day, and we can back up everybody in your email, their Exchange, their SharePoint, their OneDrive. Okay? And if you have some unique hardware in the environment, like Cisco UCS, we protect those. We do a integration with Cisco UCS Manager and backups different attributes, different configuration in their systems there. Okay. And again, just want to mention we've been around for a while, so we have a lot of customers that are in mixed environments, right? So you could be a small site, commercial, or local state government, or education. Everybody has data, and we want to be able to back it up in a simplistic approach where you don't have to juggle and deal with multiple products. Okay? And we love to, for you guys to do your research, come to our website, download an evaluation copy, do some POC, or read some third-party reviews. If you guys want to do a one-on-one demo with myself or one of the other SEs we have, we can certainly schedule a call, take a deeper dive into your environment, show you everything you want to see in the product. And, if we're a good fit, we'd love to have that conversation, right? Towards the end of this presentation, I'll be around for questions and answers. Feel free to type those in the chat. Now, before we leave here, or I leave here, I'm going to share my screen and kind of show you a quick glimpse of the interface, right? What it looks like to run your backup system. Okay? So I believe you guys can see my screen here. And what you're looking at is the Unitrends console. And the UI today is all web-based. So I don't have to log into a server. I don't have to download a client or install the client. It's all through my web UI here, right? So you can see here, this is the web UI with all my different dashboards. So very easily, you can look at your backups, your storage, your restore, your active job. And this interface here is fully customizable. I can come in here and actually move things around and prioritize what's important to me, right? And of course, from these links here, you can actually go in and quickly download a report. So if you need to grab a report for your team, your management, looking at what you backed up, what you restored, you can export these reports. And auditors love these reports too, right? If you're getting audited often, you may want to go in and generate a compliance report and give those to your auditors, right? And we have plenty of reports for you to choose from when it comes to backup and DR. Real quickly here on the config tab, in the initial setup, we'd love to remote in and help you set up everything. So it's more of a hands-on onboarding process. We'll train you on the product. We have classes, we have certification that you can explore with. Some of the different configurations you can do here includes managing multiple systems by adding additional appliances. Maybe you have some existing storage lying around that you like to use. We can certainly take advantage of NASs, SAN, cloud, everything you want to add here when it comes to extending your backup to third-party storage, right? Or if you like to configure your bandwidth use, right? Maybe you have that internet connection that's really fast or it's really slow, but you still have to get your data off-site. So we can actually come in here and throttle your bandwidth when it comes to replication. Okay? Now, for your specific environment, everybody's environment is different. More or less, you're going to have some physical, you're going to have some virtual, you're going to have a lot of application too, right? So we want to be able to protect everything and not have you go out and find multiple solutions. And from this console here, we can back up Microsoft Exchange, for example, so all your email servers. We can do Hyper-V if you're a Hyper-V shop, like that, okay? Or we can do databases like Oracle and SQL and SharePoint. So we have plugins and integration with all those different applications you may have here. Okay? And then, of course, your vCenter and VMware. So we can back up VMware very well as well. So all we'd really need for any hypervisor level backup is just the host login. Okay? Now let me show you an example of a backup job and how easy it is to create one of these here. So let's go ahead and click backup to start this. All we have to do is just go in and grab whichever servers or assets you like to back up. So I'm just going to grab a few here. Okay. And you can choose your different categories as well, right? Your servers, your databases, your VMs, whatever you may have to select to backup. And then you can click next and then just build out a backup schedule. Very traditional. I can pick when I want to do full backups, incrementals, differential, or I like to use a calendar here, especially if you're a visual person. You can come in here and look at a calendar like this and just simply specify what day, what time, what reoccurrence you like to do for backups, right? So here's a full backup we're going to schedule, and then here's a reoccurring incremental backups we're going to do daily, right? So just a few clicks, and I have a custom schedule. Now, while we're on the screen here, I'd like to talk about a couple of things that we like to take advantage of. In one particular is the inline deduplication. What we mean by that is as we're backing up your data over the internet, it is being compressed and being deduped. So when you have a lot of VMs, a lot of data that's on your network that's identical, we're not going to send all those copies twice, right? So as you back up your data over the network, only unique data is being captured. Also, we can do synthetic full backups. If you're traditionally doing weekend full backups or month-end backups, that can go away. You don't have to back up the whole environment once a week, once a month. Unitrends will create synthetic full backups on a weekly basis, so you don't have to do those full backups again. This will dramatically drop your backup window if you're struggling to finish on a timely manner. Okay? Now let's talk about recovery, where it's most important. When it comes to restore, we can give you a lot of options. I want to certainly show you some different scenarios here, right? So this is my backup catalog, and let's take a look at what we can do for these servers. Now, on a day-to-day basis, most admins will get a request from somebody in the environment, right? Hey, I'm missing a file. I deleted something that I need to recover. So you can quickly go in and restore a file by browsing your folders and directories like this. So I can pick a date, I can pick a time, I can pick a folder, and just grab what I need to restore very easily. Okay? We can also do recovery by searches. What I mean by that is if you're looking for a specific document and you want to search for it, I can come in here and search for a file name, a file extension, a file type. And because we catalog and we store this all in our proprietary database, it's easily searchable at your fingertips, right? So I can find that historic version of a PDF or that version of a Excel spreadsheet that my accounting team is looking for. Very powerful if you're looking for file discovery. Okay? Now, what about things like databases, right? So we can back up and we can restore most types of databases. I'll show you an example here with Microsoft SQL because it's very common. So with Microsoft SQL, we can back up databases. We can truncate these log files, kind of flush them out and do your maintenance for you here as well, right? And as an example, let me show you that if you have a database with transaction logs, you can roll these back to specific point in time. You don't have to go back to last night's backup anymore. You don't have to go back to last tape backup anymore. You can actually hone into the specific minute of your transaction logs. So if you know exactly when you need to recover, you can use this option here to recover down to the exact minute. Okay? And then things like instant recovery for VMware, Hyper-V, Zen, we include all those. I'd love to show you guys that on an in-depth demo. If you like to explore this further, give us a shout, give us an email, give us a call, and we'll schedule those. And then one last thing here I'm going to show you before we kind of jump off here is our ability to fail over your environment. It's backup and recovery is not enough anymore. Simply saying that I can restore my data when I need it is still not good enough. So what we can actually provide from a DR standpoint is by not only testing your backup, but orchestrating an entire site failover. So I can actually provision resources. I can target resources to restore into and specify my objectives. So if you're trying to meet a certain RPO and RTO, we can assign these objectives. But this is where it gets interesting. We can go into your environment and dig much deeper when it comes to DR testing. We can do things like sequencing your restore or boot up. You can prioritize boot up. You can re-IP machines. You can test your applications at a very granular level, right? So if you're trying to guarantee that if that SQL server or that Exchange server comes up, we can go in and do application testing. And through these application tests, we can actually guarantee that your servers work, your services work at the database level. Okay? And what are we going to do with all these tests afterwards? We're going to verify and we're going to report them to you. And we're going to allow you to see on a day-to-day basis that your backups were tested, and this is exactly how long it took. All right. Well, that's all I have today. So, I'd love to have a further conversation, take a deeper dive into your environment, or check out an NFR copy from our website.
Great presentation, Tommy, and I love seeing the product in action in the live demo, so thank you for sharing that. We do have a number of questions for you from the audience. So before I pop those up, I'm going to go ahead and just pop up our poll question and leave that on the screen. That question is, would you like to be one of the first to learn more about the Unitrends data protection solution? So I'll leave that on the screen while we answer a number of these poll questions. Let's see. First one that came in here, they're asking, how many data centers do you have, and roughly where are they located?
Mm-hmm. So in the continental U.S., we have 4 data centers. So we have them geographically dispersed. So if you're located on the East Coast or West Coast, we can replicate you out of state, getting your data much further from where you are. If you're not in the States, we do have data centers in Europe, in Asia, in Australia, so we can get your data out much faster. If you guys need to have more specific information than that, we can have you sign an NDA and give you more specific information. Yep.
Okay, cool. And another question here is about ransomware. Can Unitrends or Unitrends Cloud help with ransomware protection?
Mm-hmm. Great question. So we do detect ransomware in your backup. I just want to be clear, though, we're not an antivirus or firewall. So you're still going to have those solutions in place to do those prevention. But what we do from a backup and DR standpoint is we monitor your data change rate. So if there's any inconsistency or anomalies in your backup growth, which is consistent with data encryption, we can notify you and alert you on those. So we measure the data entropy. So that's an important feature if you guys are very worried or if you've been hit by ransomware in the past.
Okay. Another question is about how does licensing work with Unitrends? And I assume there's also a difference between the software-only version and then the appliance version?
Right. So very easy, actually. If you look at our physical appliances, our all-in-one, it's strictly based on capacity. So if you need a specific amount of storage on the appliances, we would look at how much data you have and recommend these appliances. And that's really your licensing, the capacity of the units. If you want to use software only, then we license by sockets and servers. So we'll go in and look at how many VMware or Hyper-V hosts you have and how many sockets you have, and we license by those amounts.
Okay, and I want to point out something to the audience. For anyone out there who's having trouble seeing the presentation, click on the red button in your dock to launch the media player. That should help if you're having trouble hearing the presentation. If you can't hear me, we'll go ahead and post this in the questions Q&A box and send that out to everyone. So let's see, another question here is about a trial version. Tommy, how does it work with a trial or POC with Unitrends?
Mm-hmm. So you can download the software today right on our website. That gives you 30 days to test the software internally. We also have some great resources available if you'd like to get some assistance. So an engineer can actually reach out to you, help you set up, do some backups and restore. So that's really the fastest and easiest way to get a software license from our website. If you'd like to get a box, we can certainly coordinate with you and send out a physical appliance and have you guys run one of those 30 days in your rack, and we can test it that way.
Cool. Let's see, another question that came in is about centrally managing. If you have multiple appliances out there, is there some way to centrally manage those?
Yep, absolutely. We have the ability to manage up to 10,000 appliances. So if you have a global company, multiple offices, you can have multiple units, but the management console is always going to be one single pane of glass, one web interface.
Cool. And then what if you run out of capacity on, say, one physical appliance out there? Can you just add a second appliance, or do you replace the one you have? How does that work?
Mm-hmm. So you can do both. We can rack and stack additional appliances, right? You run out of space, you can put another unit on top of the existing one and expand your deployment that way. Or maybe you're down further into the life cycle of the hardware, and you like to get some new hardware out there, some updated hardware. So we can buy back the appliances. We can trade up to a larger unit. So it's really up to where you are with the unit and how you like to expand.
Cool. And then did you say something about, is there a trial edition available if people want to try it out?
Right on our website. Just go ahead and go to unitrends.com. There should be a button that says download trial. We just need, I believe, a quick email address, and then you can download the software to play with for 30 days. Cool.
All right. Well, great presentation. Thanks so much for being on the Enterprise Storage Megacast today, Tommy.
Thanks, everyone.
And thank you, Unitrends, for joining us. For more information on Unitrends, visit their website or click on the resource there in your console. If you haven't answered the question that's on your screen, please do it now. And I'll leave that up for just a few more seconds while I announce our first prize winner. We have an Amazon $500 gift card, and that's going out to Denise P. Last name starts with a P. From Pennsylvania. Congratulations to Denise. We'll be contacting you to deliver your Amazon $500 gift card. All right, so that's the end of our first presentation. And with that, we're going to go ahead and move on. I'm excited to introduce Dominic from Cohesity. Dominic is a technical marketing engineer. Are you there?
Yes, this is Dominic.
Hi, Dominic. Thanks for being on. Tell us about
Thank
Cohesity.
Yeah, sure. Cohesity, it's a company. It's just a new startup. It was founded in 2013. But let's just move on with the presentation itself. I guess once we get to that point, I can discuss a little bit more about our company and what we do exactly. Again, my name is Dominic Chia. I'm a technical marketing engineer here at Cohesity. Our presentation today is on data protection for the cloud era. So a little bit about Cohesity itself, the company. The company was founded in 2013. Our founder is Mohit Aron. He's a well-known co-founder and ex-CTO of Nutanix, where he actually pioneered the concept of hyperconverged. Prior to Nutanix, Mohit actually spent 5 years over at Google helping build the Google file system. It's a web-scale system that touches all data stored on Google. In 2013, Mohit actually decided to leave Nutanix with the vision of starting a new hyperconvergence company to solve enterprise secondary storage problems. We've been backed by top-tier VCs, one of them being Sequoia, and the rest of our great investors include Google Ventures, Accel, Artist Ventures, Qualcomm, Ring Ventures, and most recently as well, HPE. We're very proud of our adoption rate. So one of the things that we want to talk about as well is that we will look at some of the, as you can see from our page here, we have some of our solutions. So with the current legacy data protection issues, most of the solutions were designed more than a decade ago. The first in some of the issues is that in a data protection environment, we'll start off with looking at the data center where you have virtual environments, physical servers, and databases. So in legacy data solutions, they are kind of complex. There's the hardware silos, the management complexity, and there's no scale out when they were kind of created. These products don't exactly scale out, and as a result, expanding capacity or upgrading a product may require complicated forklifts. Additionally, the second problem with legacy backups is it's very slow. Typically, sometimes you will do a weekly full and daily incrementals, meaning that you only have a 24-hour RPO, and you could lose a day of data if things go wrong. Recovering from traditional backups can take hours, if not days, leaving your business at risk for a long period of time. Third is that legacy backup solutions are very expensive. They can have a list price north of $10,000 per terabyte. Secondary storage is most often expensive when compared to all-flash primary storage. All-flash primary storage is running our most demanding applications in production, and that's where we should be spending our premium dollars, not on secondary storage. On top of the high acquisition price, secondary storage also requires implementation services and often require complicated setups. Legacy data protection were not designed for cloud. It's bolt-on gateways and increases complexity. You have to deploy, which typically the bolt-on cloud gateway, which typically only provides limited functionality. This gateway becomes yet another silo that has to be maintained and managed over time. It's obvious that legacy data protection is falling short of some customer needs. Let's take a look at how this plays out in a legacy data center. We'll start off by looking at the legacy data center environments where we have virtual environments, physical servers, and databases. This typically consists of high-end databases, Linux and Windows servers such as Oracle or SQL servers. Now let's take a look at it from the data protection perspective. In the old ways, it starts off with a backup software that is deployed to media servers from different vendors, right? The backup software needs to store data somewhere. So typically that involves having to have target storage on dedupe appliances such as data domain or from other vendors. To manage the process, you also need some master servers as well. And finally, when customers want to archive for long term, you also include tape. Let's go through some of the problems that's actually associated with this infrastructure. The legacy data centers with multiple point solutions are fragmented, they are silos, complex, and also there's only local dedupe. The next problem is that legacy data protection is also very inefficient. Recoveries can take hours or even days in case of large failures. System upgrades are very disruptive and typically require bringing down the environment. Capacity expansion, especially for target storage, may require forklift upgrades. Finally, when many customers want to leverage the cloud for long-term data retention or for replication and disaster recovery, these legacy solutions were built before the days of the public cloud, so they were not actually designed with the cloud in mind. So using the cloud requires deploying bolt-on solutions, typically a cloud gateway again. So let's take a look at how Cohesity can actually simplify data protection. The Cohesity platform can replace backup software, your media server, target storage, your master servers, and your cloud gateways with a single integrated solution. The Cohesity platform is actually scale-out. It is a software-defined platform that runs on industry-standard x86 nodes. The platform is designed to consolidate secondary storage with best-in-class space efficiency. Cohesity also runs Data Protect. This allows a converged backup product embedded in the Cohesity platform. There is no separate hardware to buy and no other UI to manage. Everything is from a single pane of glass. Cohesity data platform is scale-out. It's always on, always available, and completely eliminates the need to do forklift upgrades and data migrations. All this functionality is managed through, again, a single pane of glass and a single set of APIs. This helps reduce management overhead. Cohesity is also non-disruptive in terms of the expansion. Cohesity scales in a Google-like way. So if you run out of space, you can simply add nodes to the existing cluster to increase capacity. Instead of over-provisioning, you can purchase what you need on day one and add capacity over time. Beyond simplicity, Cohesity also makes data protection dramatically more efficient. We dedupe globally between all the nodes in the cluster. It provides much greater space efficiency than legacy products. Using our scale-out file system with unlimited snapshots, we can actually provide very fast RPOs. Instead of doing incrementals daily, you can now protect your data as often as every 5 minutes. Because we can also provide near instant recovery times by using a full catalog of fully hydrated, always ready backup images, your data is always ready to be restored and available to you. All the VMs, the file metadata that's ingested by our system is indexed automatically, and it's always searchable. You can now search to recover instead of having to remember to recover something, because it's so Google-like, it's so intuitive. Cohesity is also designed for the enterprise. We have native cloud integration to eliminate the need to use separate cloud gateways. We also provide remote replication. You can deploy Cohesity in multiple data centers and replicate between sites for off-site data protection and disaster recovery. We do support software-based encryption. Customers can choose which subset of data needs to be encrypted and can use different encryption keys for different subsets. Cohesity is also available for remote and branch offices use cases. We have a small appliance form factor specifically for robo environments. Cohesity is also available as a virtual appliance to be deployed on virtual servers. Finally, we also support partnerships. We have with, for example, Pure Storage integration. We integrate Pure Storage automatically to tier Pure snapshots from primary to Cohesity. The whole process can be automated from the Cohesity UI. The end picture looks very much simpler with Cohesity because you have probably a lot of legacy data protection solutions installed. So rip and replace is not something that you want to do, right? Cohesity is not a rip and replace solution. We can be adopted very easily in a non-disruptive way and work with existing solutions to protect your data. Cohesity Data Protect is our backup software, but we also have data platform that exposes itself through industry standard protocols like NFS and SMB. Third-party data protection solutions that you currently have in-house can simply write to Cohesity through these interfaces. In this case, data platform can be used as a more efficient scale-out backup target with global dedupe. We are also providing customers with more options. You can start off by using data platform as a backup target, and over time decide if you want to migrate to our converged backup solution with Data Protect. And even though we support cloud for long-term archival, we also support tape. So if you have an existing tape library, you can tape out from Cohesity for long-term data retention. Our philosophy is to address customer problems step by step, not using a rip and replace strategy, but to integrate with your current solutions. Cohesity can actually provide near instant recovery times, sub 5-minute RPOs by using always ready snapshot capabilities of our file system. Let's just say, for example, the first backup that we take of an application is going to be a full. In this case, here we'll take a full backup, which is backup 0, and store it on the Cohesity file system. Subsequent backups are just going to be incrementals. The first thing we do is take a clone of backup 0 on our file system. This clone uses our underlying Snap3 technology, which provides zero-cost unlimited snapshots and clones. We'll then take the incremental image from primary, which only contains the change blocks since the previous backup, and we'll apply the delta to backup 0 clone, and the result is backup 1. Even though we've only moved the change blocks, backup 1 becomes a fully hydrated backup image on the Cohesity's file system. Also note that backup 0 and 1 are linked clones, so they are very space efficient, and we only consume the space required for the deltas. We have unlimited snapshot capabilities, which allows us to provide very fast sub 5-minute RPOs. You may take as many incrementals as you want, but they'll be kept as fully hydrated images on Cohesity. Next, we'll take another incremental following the same process. We'll make a clone of backup 1. We'll pull the incremental change blocks from primary and apply those changes to clone to create a fully hydrated backup 2. As you can see, we easily can end up with a complete catalog of always ready images. These images are all instantly available for instant recovery for any other purposes. You can even use it for test and dev, and there's also integration with NAS devices as well. When we look at public cloud, we are thinking of it as providing a different consumption model. Your private infrastructure is like owning a house, and the public cloud is like renting a hotel room. Long term, most enterprises are going to be hybrid, so it's a mix of both public and private clouds to meet different needs. Many of our customers are actually looking for a simple way to use the public cloud. But it is also very difficult to do that with legacy solutions because they were not built with cloud in mind. Cohesity is designed with a cloud-ready approach and makes it very easy to use the public cloud. We enable customers to use the cloud for long-term data retention and as off-site storage facility to keep the data that you don't need to access frequently. Our first cloud feature is called Cloud Archive. Customers can easily set policy to automatically archive older backups to the cloud for long-term retention. Think of this as being a feature that's a better alternative to tape archival. The cloud will be less expensive and much more manageable than tape. In this example, we are actually using a couple of backups sitting on the Cohesity cluster, and we set a policy for Cloud Archive. So we can actually archive backup 0 over into the cloud, and we can also archive backup 1 once you do compression and encryption. In this example, we're taking a new backup 2, and the older backup is actually moved into the cloud. We can manage the keys. We also do encryption, and we can manage the keys ourselves using our own external key management service. And after some time, if you decide a new backup tree is taken, at any point in time, based on your policy, on your requirements, we can move backup 3 as well. We dedupe the data and only send the unique blocks that are not yet available in the cloud. With dedupe and compression, cloud actually becomes a less expensive alternative than tape. It is also very much more manageable. You no longer have to manage tape rotations and quickly recover files and VMs from the cloud. The data that is stored in the cloud has been indexed by the Cohesity cluster. That actually enables you to do file-level search for any data stored in the cloud. Once you have identified your fields, you can immediately begin your recovery process of the entire VM or even at the individual file level. Finally, you can archive not only the initial cluster, but you can also recover to another cluster as well. This gives you the protection against the loss of an entire cluster or data center in the initial location. Let's take a look at our second cloud integration, which is our Cloud Archive, Cloud Tier solution. The second feature that we are looking at is called Cloud Tier. Think of it as being a remote disk for your Cohesity cluster that you can expand the capacity of your existing cluster with. Customers, again, can use policy on the Cohesity cluster that cold data should be automatically tiered to the cloud. In this example, let's assume that the user has a cloud tier policy. Some of the data can become cold, so Cohesity can actually move those data into the cloud. The cloud effectively becomes another lower performance tier of capacity for your Cohesity cluster. Your cluster now has SSDs for the very hot data, and HDDs for intermediate data, and the cloud for cold data. Effectively, you've expanded the capacity of your cluster without having to deploy additional nodes. At some point, the data may become hot again. Perhaps the user needs to access the data and make some changes to it. In this case, we don't want to incur the latency of having to repeatedly access the data in the cloud. So we will just automatically move some of the data back to the on-premise cluster. Finally, let's take a look at the Cloud Replicate, our broadest cloud integration capability. Cloud Replicate is actually our most exciting cloud feature and really enables users to build a hybrid cloud data fabric. With Cloud Replicate, we're not just using the cloud to store data, but we are also running a Cohesity cluster in the cloud. In this scenario, we've just taken backup 0 on the local cluster. We want to replicate that data back up into the cloud. For Cloud Replicate, we're running Cohesity cluster on Cloud VMs. We spin up the Cohesity cluster prior to starting the replication. We then replicate backup 0 to the cloud. Replication enables a short RPO, and you can replicate each backup upon completion to minimize the risk of data loss. And again, we are thinking of the cloud as a convenient lease consumption model, just like a hotel where you're renting space. But the cloud can also be expensive if you use too much of it. So to keep costs under control, we can bring the Cohesity cluster down after the replication is complete. We then complete backup 1. Based on the policies that you've created, you manage and you schedule, We'll also replicate this back up to the cloud as well. So we'll bring the Cohesity cluster in the cloud back online. We then perform the replication of backup 1 and finally take the Cohesity cluster down again. So what use cases does Cloud Replicate enable? First, it's very short RPO by replicating data as soon as backup jobs are completed. Next, disaster recovery to the cloud is faster. You have a faster recovery time. Imagine your main data center goes down and you've lost the cluster. You can bring the Cohesity cluster and recover your applications quickly in the cloud. The second use case is actually in test and dev. If your developers need a copy of production in the cloud for development, Cohesity can make that copy instantly available. The third use case is cloud analytics. You can make the data on Cohesity available to run analytics jobs in the cloud. To summarize, Cohesity gives you numerous advantages over legacy for data protection. On the left, you have a legacy solution, so let's compare it with a Cohesity solution on the right. Legacy data protection consists of multiple inefficient silos. We have a single scale-out platform with converged data protection. Legacy solutions can be complex to manage. You have to deal with multiple vendors, and each silo has to be sized, deployed, configured, and managed separately. With Cohesity, you are dealing with a single vendor and a single platform to manage through a single pane of glass. Legacy deduplication can also be fragmented. Target storage consists of point appliances that only dedupe within the appliance, not across them. With Cohesity, we provide global deduplication and we dedupe data across all the nodes in the cluster. Legacy solutions is also very slow. You're looking at daily backups and a 24-hour window for RPOs, and hours, if not days, to recover. With Cohesity, you can take backups as often as every 5 minutes, and we support near instant recoveries even for large multi-VM environments. On the left, upgrades and expansions can be very, very disruptive. You may need to over-provision capacity on day one. Legacy solutions only have limited cloud integration, whereas Cohesity is actually built with strong cloud integration from the very beginning. We've looked at the high level at how Cohesity can provide simpler data protection. Let's take a deeper look into how our key technical differentiators actually can help you solve some problems. One key characteristic of our platform is that it is distributed. It's a scale-out system. We provide an always-on system and eliminate the need to do forklift upgrades. In this example, we have customers' requirement on day 0. With legacy, customers are typically going to over-provision capacity to make sure they don't run out of space over time. Because expanding capacity leads to more hardware silos and also forklift upgrades, customers will typically over-provision by 2x or 5x their initial capacity requirements and overpay on day 1. Legacy system has now run out of space. At that point in time, customers will often do a forklift upgrade. That means bringing in new systems, migrating the data from old to new, and finally decommissioning the old system. It's a very expensive, time-consuming process. With Cohesity, it's so much more simpler. You can just keep on adding nodes as your capacity requirements increase. Cohesity automatically rebalances the data between all the nodes, and you don't have to do any manual data migrations. Old and new data can coexist in a single cluster. At Cohesity, we typically don't lead with cost reduction, but you can intuitively see that the Cohesity solution is going to be simpler and more cost-effective. In fact, we enable a very significant cost advantage even when looking at only the direct vendor costs, product, and 3 years of support and maintenance. In the case of legacy, you have to purchase private storage and pay for both product and maintenance. Additionally, you also have to purchase backup software, again with license and maintenance. With Cohesity, you have one product to purchase, and we typically provide at least a 50% TCO cost savings when compared to legacy backup solutions. We've just seen how Cohesity can simplify and improve your backup environment. But as we said in the beginning, Cohesity is much more than just backups. The thesis behind Cohesity is, why is data protection just an insurance policy? Cohesity as a company has a broader vision than just data protection. We are designed to converge all secondary storage. Beyond data protection, that includes test depth, storage, analytics, files, and also objects. So you can use Cohesity to back up. But the next time your test and dev team needs a test environment, you don't have to deploy another silo. You can instantly provision test and dev copies from data sitting on Cohesity. Similarly, for analytics, you can do queries directly in place on Cohesity. Our philosophy is to bring compute to the data instead of moving data to the compute. Cohesity also presents NFS, SMB, and S3 interfaces. So for non-mission critical file shares, we can just consolidate those on Cohesity instead of deploying a dedicated file share or object silo. That is the vision and simplicity of Cohesity. We are referring to our vision as hyper-converged secondary storage. To summarize what we do, we actually simplify data protection. That's our leading use case. We also help reduce your data protection cost by more than 50%. We make the data productive. You can search through the data and perform in-place analytics. You can use the data to provision instant test and dev copies to your developers. What we are really about is hyper-converged secondary storage. It is not just a backup. We believe that your infrastructure should be more than just an insurance policy and should make your data productive. After all, most of the big organizations are using their data, their backup data for users. Why not you? So this concludes our presentation. If there's any questions, we will open to that right now.
Great presentation. Yes, thank you, Dominic. We do have a number of questions here for you from the audience. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so if you don't mind answering those questions electronically, that would be great. But really good presentation. Thanks for being on the event today.
Thank you very much.
For more information about Cohesity, visit cohesity.com. And while I announce our next Amazon $500 gift card winner, I'm just going to leave this question up on the screen. It is, would you like to be one of the first to learn more about the Cohesity data protection solution? So while I leave that up on the screen for you to answer, the next Amazon $500 gift card winner is going out to Mark. Last name starts with the letter P as in Paul, from California. Congratulations, Mark. You are the next gift card winner. So if you haven't answered that question, go ahead and do it now because the event is moving on. All right. I'm excited to introduce the next presenter on today's Enterprise Storage Megacast. That is Krish, who is the Director of Product Marketing at Nutanix. Krish, are you with us?
I am. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you.
Excellent. Tell us about Nutanix and your innovative enterprise storage solutions.
Absolutely. And before I jump into the crux of that, I want to kind of address the heart of the issue, right, of the problem we're trying to solve. So it all comes down to what's being asked of us, the IT organizations today in the industry, right? It's all about how do we use IT better, expose new digital channels to reach out to our customers, procure new customers, and establish loyalty. Now, if you're all busy managing the infrastructure, we're going to lose that opportunity to truly innovate and build that competitive differentiator into our technology, right, that our businesses rely on. Now, what's really cool about that whole trend is that the public cloud today has kind of reset those IT expectations, right? So first of all, you can very quickly go to market by deploying your own applications. Quite often you hear stories of, sole developers in Nigeria that spin up an AWS account, build an application, deploy it, and you hear about these really nice stories where they've built businesses that way. That was unheard of even 10 to 15 years ago. It's amazing what the cloud has unlocked in terms of opportunity these days. The second piece of it is all of us used to groan when it came to these large CapEx expenditures, right? When you need to set up a new data center, it was millions and millions of dollars. And the clouds kind of really set the expectation that you should never have to pay for something you don't need right now. So the whole notion of fractional IT consumption is powerful, and that's native to the cloud experience. Thirdly is the whole notion of one-click simplicity. It's all about what we were just talking about. Time spent on managing the infrastructure is time lost when it comes to actually building cool, innovative, and pleasing experiences for your customers, partners, and prospects. Then finally is the whole notion of continuous innovation, right? If the infrastructure is being managed by the cloud vendor, they're focused solely on that. They're going to be continuously releasing new updates, making sure you have the best IOPS that you're looking for, the best CPU utilization, and all those additional services that get layered on top of that. So that's really what the cloud has done for us. So anyone who's got compute and storage muscle in the data center they find it hard to keep up with all this innovation that's happening in the public cloud. So that's where we kind of took a hard look at, what the public cloud really is and how can we kind of mirror that elsewhere, wherever compute and storage exist within organizations these days. Now, here's the thing, right? The public cloud is here to stay. It's mainstream, but we have these other clouds that have kind of sprouted elsewhere as well, right? So the first notion of it is the private cloud that's in the data center. So IT organizations have taken that opportunity to really take some of those learnings from the public cloud and see how they can replicate that in the private cloud. Because the private cloud is truly where you need to be putting those predictable and applications that require a high level of security, and that is not susceptible to bursts and such. That is more suited for the public cloud. The third is the whole notion of the distributed cloud, right? And these are really edges. They could be in your branch offices, if you're in the oil and gas industry or the cruise industry, if you will. You've got ships out in the waters, oil rigs, things like that. So there's always some sort of compute around, just outside the data center or the public cloud, and the whole the amount of effort it takes to manage all of these things side by side is incredibly hard for IT organizations that are being asked to do a lot more with a lot less, and quite often you find that there's different processes for these, right? For each of these flavors of cloud, if you will. Different tech stacks, the applications and data cannot be lifted and shifted easily, right? You need to actually do a lot of development work and re-architecting for that to be possible. The management is fragmented. Quite often you have the notion of a chief Amazon officer or a chief Azure officer that manages the relationship with the cloud vendor and has a whole team that manages how resources are procured and applications are deployed and such on those public clouds. So that's, again, a lot of redundancies in an IT organization that's already stressed for time. Then the final piece of it is a challenge for CIOs that are trying to reconcile expenses, right? So there's inconsistent consumption models across all of these clouds, and that leads to a lot of choppiness, right, in terms of how budgets get utilized when it's spent on infrastructure, be it in the data center or up in the cloud. And that's really the problem, right? First, the whole benefit of the public cloud, as well as the complexity that's growing in organizations today as they have to manage across all of this, the public cloud, private data centers or the private clouds within the data center, as well as all the compute that's on the edge, right? So how do you manage all of that? How do you make it easy? And that's the problem we're trying to solve at Nutanix. So the core of that is we need to build a multi-cloud architecture, and we need to have a multi-cloud architecture, not build one, but that spans all these clouds, the public, the private, and the distributed cloud, and give it the IT organizations, all IT admins, be it in storage, networking, sysadmins, app teams, one way to kind of get to the infrastructure they need, irrespective of where it is, right? So that's really what's going to scale and what's really going to enable IT organizations to do amazing things that go beyond managing the infrastructure. So at the very core of that, we took a full stack approach to it, because if you don't, you risk giving a very fragmented experience to your IT audiences that care about this, right? So the last thing we want to do is have our customers, prospects, and the IT organizations as a whole jump across multiple screens, manage through silos, and really be in a state where there's stalemate between teams when things go wrong or things don't work out the way it should. So the full stack approach really helps us preserve that high level and pleasing experience. Right? So the very first thing we did is at the hardware layer is we converged server and storage and added a layer of data protection on top of it, right? With a data replication, software encryption for data and such, right? That's really the core of it. And on top of that, it's all about exposing the hardware, right, infrastructure out to the various stakeholders in the IT organization and beyond. So we introduced our own layer of virtualization on top of that called AHV. And the very philosophy of virtualization is, when you think about the cloud, moving to AWS or public cloud on Azure, right? You're not thinking about, hey, what virtualizer do they use, right? What hypervisor do they use? It's baked into it. It's a part of the cloud experience. And we've taken that similar philosophy and made our virtualization layer, our hypervisor is free as a result of that, right? So you have that baked into the Nutanix experience. Now, once you have that, it's all about the networking piece of it. And the networking is all about how do you define a network that's fluid, that's ever-changing as you think about containers with, that's being utilized on that infrastructure and multiple stakeholders, app teams, business units and such that are using that shared infrastructure, right? So it's all software-defined networking. You can define microsegments and enforce security across your distributed network, and also monitor it so you can discover the flows, choose which ones are allowed, which ones are not, identify bottlenecks, figure out what's causing them, eliminate those. So all that's kind of baked into the Nutanix experience. So once you've got the infrastructure piece figured out and built, the layer on top of that is all about one-click operations, right? I have not heard enough. I mean, the one thing that I constantly hear from customers is the pain that they face when they have to manage their entire stack, right? Firmware upgrades, middleware upgrades, OS updates, the updates for the hypervisor, compatibility lists, how do they reconcile against that? There's hours and hours of work that goes into just keeping that stack up to date. And quite often they're paying, 15, 16, 17, 18% to vendors for maintenance costs, right, for new updates and such, but are never able to use it because they can't make the upgrade, right? So there's a lot of pain that's being felt by customers today on that side. Now, with the one-click operations piece of it, first of all, we take care of updates for you, right? So Nutanix literally has a one-click upgrade policy where it'll identify all the dependencies and roll out updates across the stack. So you never have to worry about it, right? It has intimate knowledge of what the dependencies look like, which firmware updates needs to go, or what needs to happen first before, based on the dependency map, to see how you have the latest and greatest that's running in your data centers at all times. Now, extending the one-click operations piece of it is day-to-day operations, right? So there's capabilities where you can manage your entire distributed cloud, if you will, through the Prism interface. It's one way to basically take a look at your entire infrastructure and manage it on a day-to-day basis. Whether you are doing upgrades, whether you're trying to understand which applications are running where or how they are performing, and also leveraging a lot of machine learning capabilities that's baked into it to see what kind of capacity you're going to need 6 months from now or 2 months from now, right? So you've got all that built into it. Now, on top of that, when you've got all these things taken care of, is focusing on the applications, right? So that's what really drives business. And we've taken a hard look at doing that, and we just released a capability where you'd be able to publish blueprints, right, that are on top of, through Prism, the user interface, to be able to automatically deploy applications or enable your stakeholders to deploy applications through the app marketplace and configure how they are deployed, where they are deployed, how they are scaled out, how they are upgraded, and finally how they are destroyed when it's used. So the whole benefit of that is when a developer comes asking for, say, a VM, right, they no longer have to wait for 2 to 3 weeks after submitting an IT ticket to get it. All they need to do is go to this marketplace and say that they need VMs or they need a LAMP stack or a Kubernetes setup, and the blueprints would automate the whole process of doing it, in addition to checking all the approvals and such. So you basically crunched that SLA from 2 to 3 weeks to a matter of minutes. So that's a real benefit there. The final piece is the multi-cloud management, right? We talked about how organizations rely on not just the private cloud and the data center, but also are trying to have some sort of footprint on the public cloud and such. So this whole notion of the hybrid cloud is here to stay, right? And especially if you were at AWS reInvent last week or at the Gartner conference in Vegas this week, there's a lot of talk around the hybrid cloud. And the challenge with the hybrid cloud is it's apples and oranges, right? There's very few similarities, operational similarities between the public cloud and the private cloud. So what Nutanix does is to make that experience similar, right? Through our partnership with Google, as well as our own Xi cloud services that we're going to be releasing shortly. We have stood up Nutanix stack, the entire stack, on Google on Google data centers, right? Google Cloud data centers, as well as our own Xi data centers, to be able to expose other services like disaster recovery as a service, and then from that point on, other services as well. Excuse me. So customers can choose to consume Nutanix as a service, or easily stand up disaster recovery as a service instead of having dedicated data centers to actually account for DR, right? So that's a huge cost saving from that perspective. Now, what I'd like to also talk about is this whole notion of choice, right? So organizations, IT needs to work for IT organizations, not the other way around, right? So very often you see, if you have to move an application to AWS or Azure or anything else that's stood up in the private cloud, there's a lot of excuse me, there's a lot of transformation that has to take place in the application, the stack, in order to make those applications work. So we take a different approach to it. Your application should work on the stack irrespective of how it was built, right? So we offer a lot of freedom of choice in terms of how you want to stand up the Nutanix stack. We support all the popular hypervisors, from Citrix, Microsoft, VMware, and we have our own, the Nutanix AHV as well. We also can be consumed in multiple forms. You can either get a turnkey appliance from Nutanix called the NX series, or you can buy from Dell, which has a model called the Dell XC that basically bakes in Nutanix software onto Dell boxes and ships them out to you. We have a similar agreement with Lenovo as well. So Lenovo also OEMs Nutanix through its HX series. And we support Cisco, HP, IBM Power, and others as well. And there's multiple consumption models. One is you can, of course, get that appliance, or you can just buy the software, the Nutanix Cloud OS, if you will, and choose to buy the hardware later on as and when you need it as you're scaling out. And we also have agreements with a number of clouds as we further our hybrid cloud roadmap, right, with AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google GCP, as well as our own Xi cloud services. The one thing that I like to say is that, it's been amazing to see the growth that the company has had. We've been really putting our ear to the ground to understand what they need and get that feedback on how we need to continue to mature this cloud OS, right? So we have a number of companies, and pretty much all the number one companies across these industries run on Nutanix. Excuse me. Literally 2 years ago, we had 1,000 customers, and today, 2 years hence, we have 8,000 customers, and so it's been an amazing ride to see the company grow and really add value. Just a little bit more on Nutanix. We've got really, really good support to the point where 97% of our customers are very happy with the Nutanix experience, and we have got an NPS score of more than 90, and that's unheard of in most any industry. So we take customer support and customer satisfaction very seriously. We're across the world. We've got 24 by 7 by 365 support, and have customers over 100 countries. So we're a mature organization with a global footprint that's really helping organizations transform how they manage their infrastructure. With that, I'd like to thank you and take any questions if you have them.
Yes, great presentation. Thank you, Krish. There are a number of questions for you. While I ask you those questions, I'm going to pop up this next poll question here for the audience. The question is, would you like to be one of the first to learn more about the Nutanix digital transformation solution that was presented here today? So the first question that came in here is about the status of the Nutanix Xi cloud. Is it pronounced Xi or?
It's Xi for Xi, so it's Xi. Yes.
Xi, you say Xi? Okay. So they're asking about the state of the Nutanix Xi cloud. Can you give us any sort of time frame or details on that?
Absolutely. So it's currently under development, and we're going to be starting up 2 data centers on the West Coast, 2 in the East Coast, and also leverage our partnership with Google to stand up the Xi cloud within Google Cloud data centers as well. The plan right now is to go beta in the middle of next year and GA towards the end of next year.
Okay, excellent. And then Gary is asking, what hardware do the Nutanix appliances use?
Supermicro.
Supermicro, okay.
Yes.
Are they also available on Dell or just Supermicro?
Absolutely. So the Nutanix NX appliance is what Nutanix sells as a turnkey solution, right? So that uses Supermicro. Dell uses, of course, Dell's own hardware and layers on the Nutanix OS because all the software stack, right? All the intelligence, everything we just talked about is all in software. So what Dell does is they install it on their boxes, and it's branded as Dell XC. So XC, 2 letters, that they sell. So basically, if you order Dell XC, you pretty much get Dell boxes with Nutanix software pre-installed on it that you can stand up in your data centers.
Okay, excellent. And then another question.
And the other flavors that I suggested also, that I spoke about also was, Lenovo, right? So Lenovo does the same thing as Dell. And we also support Cisco, HP as well. So you can buy, if you've got relationships with Cisco and HP, you can purchase their hardware and then install the Nutanix software on top of that.
I see. Okay, excellent. Another question here is, how do I get public cloud economics with the Nutanix private cloud infrastructure?
Great question. So I don't think they are competitive to each other, right? They're very, very different in terms of, they're very complementary to each other. So you always want to put bursty, unpredictable workloads on the public cloud and predictable, long-running, perpetual workloads in the private cloud, because every conversation I've had with customers of us, they've always said first of all, it's far cheaper to run predictable workloads in the private cloud that have high security requirements, high data protection requirements as well, than it is to actually run them in the public cloud, because the public cloud has, there's certain elements of unpredictability there, right? So if you, especially if there's some sort of seasonality built into your business, you have no clue what your bill's going to look like at the end of the month. So there's this constant, complementary relationship between the public and private cloud, which is what's kind of led to this whole notion of the hybrid cloud. Now, I want to add to that another interesting case study that I always hear from our customers is that they find, if you add in the operational soft costs and such as well, that having private cloud that's built on hyperconverged infrastructure, like Nutanix is always cheaper than running traditional three-tier architecture. So that's been a very interesting data point that we've heard on the field, regularly, consistently.
Excellent. Well, I think that's all the time we have for questions. There's a number of questions left for you there in the queue. If you don't mind getting back to those attendees, I appreciate it. Thanks for being on the Storage Megacast today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you to Nutanix for joining us today. For more information on Nutanix, visit Nutanix.com. Also check out their resource there in your console. If you haven't answered the question on the screen, that is, would you like to be one of the first to learn more about Nutanix? Please go ahead and answer that now. Well, I give away our next Amazon $500 gift card. That is going out to Jolene Benzie from Pennsylvania. Congratulations, Jolene. We'll reach out to you to deliver your gift card. After our next presentation, make sure you stay tuned for that, because we're going to be doing our grand prize, or the first of our grand prize giveaways. All right. And with that, I'm excited to introduce Christian Smith, who is the Vice President of Product at Igneous. Christian, are you there?
I am here, David. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for being on the Megacast today. Take it away.
Absolutely. So we're probably a newer entrant for all of you that you may not have heard of, but Igneous, we're based here out of Seattle. A lot of history in the system space and the storage space with our founders, and you can look at our website at igneous.io to take a look at that. But I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we do, and then attempt to flip over and do a little bit of a demo for everybody and make sure I stay to my time of 20 minutes. So with that, let me get started and just talk to you about Igneous. Today we're going to talk about consolidated backup and archive for file systems, and this is the solution that we'll demo today, and how we make this a reality and help create some efficiency in your environment with some of the new, more modern ways of managing unstructured data. Our platform is really called the Igneous Hybrid Storage Cloud, and we'll go through some definitions of what that means. Just walking through the high-level statement. So what does Igneous do? Well, we offer data management for unstructured data. So we are primarily focused on things like files, and these files tend to live in places like NAS, and that just goes to our heritage at places like Isilon and NetApp in our past, and also having members of our team here come from many of the cloud providers that are in this area, like AWS and Azure and Google Cloud. So what do we think about when we talk about data management in a hybrid world? Well, first and foremost, there's the protection of data. So how do you create very simple and easy to manage data protection policies for doing things like backup and archive of this unstructured data? And when we talk about unstructured data, we tend to talk to customers who have lots of unstructured data. So this isn't, 100 terabytes of unstructured data. This is workflows where unstructured data tends to be in the petabyte to 2 petabyte range, where just managing that becomes a real challenge. And once you understand where that data lives and how you set protection policies on that, the next step is to figure out how to move that data, and how do you do that effectively and efficiently without impacting those source side systems. And movement could be from a NAS device over to the Igneous appliance in the data center, or it could be movement from NAS devices to Igneous to the public cloud as that secondary copy, or as data that you want to use up in the public cloud. It tends to look like file is one of those things that moving, a file at a time tends to be a real challenge. And so we've addressed a lot of ways to make that movement more efficient as you go to the public cloud. And then the last thing we focus on is really discovery of that data. So you have that data, you need to be able to move it around, but we look at the pile of data that sits out there in the file space, and how do you kind of bring some meaning to that? How do you illuminate that data? And so it's both indexing that data for search capabilities as data resides, on the hybrid cloud in our appliance, but also in Amazon, but also for data that doesn't even leave your NAS systems. How can we create an effective index on that so you can just go search for your data as opposed to traversing through paths? So that's the what we focused on in our backup and archive solution. If I just kind of sum that up in just a very simple diagram, just to give you a mental model of what it looks like, well, there's NAS attached storage that we are API integrated with. We have our appliance that sits on-prem today, and this appliance has a number of different functions there. So it does both converge from storing the data on our platform, but it contains the data movement engine associated with having that data move from primary storage to Igneous to the cloud, or just from primary over to the cloud. And of course, we offer a number of services there, such as backup, archive, search, and have APIs to integrate with other backup-based software or archive-based software for things that may be more structured in their nature. If I talk about kind of the problems that we're trying to solve today, they really come in two flavors. And where do we see people evaluating their backup environment, evaluating how they manage NAS? And the first one looks like this, which is a traditional environment, more NDMP-based backup servers, tape. And I think where customers are getting a little frustrated with this is that there's a lot of file data out there, and that file data just continues to grow. And so doing things like backing up this data with traditional means you have to really partition your backup environment, because catalogs are just not built to handle millions of files, and as a result, you got to start to partition your catalogs to handle highly dense, large amounts of capacity, large amounts of file density across an environment. And then on top of that, you got to go manage the whole paradigm of getting that data, off the tape, off-site, retrieve from off-site. It's just a lot of manual labor there. And then, the secondary problem with that is that the methods for backing up data in this model, date back to the early 90s. And so this was a model that was really built for a streaming model. And so when backup is running, you tend to notice that on those source side systems. So, kind of moving that forward a little bit, a lot of people have moved to vendor-to-vendor replication, which solved that problem of, a little bit more efficient replication from system to system, but there's still that poor visibility of data. You don't know what you have on source side versus destination side. You're very locked into a specific vendor in terms of your primary and your secondary. You can't move data from platform to platform to evaluate, newer technologies, and it's pretty expensive to set this up in environments today, just because source side systems look a lot like destination systems, and when you add the software on top of that, this just becomes a very expensive model. But the reality is what we've seen is most people actually kind of have both. They have, some stuff that goes off through, backup software. They have some stuff that goes off through replication, and it kind of limits, what you can do in consolidating this environment and being able to really get economies of scales for that secondary storage and consolidating this whole, mass of secondary storage, and at the same time have visibility to all that data. And so that's really what Igneous does with its data protection, movement, and discovery. And there's one little twist on this that I'll talk about sort of in the follow-up with this, which is we deliver it all as a service. And so all of the cloud mechanics that people like, which is I don't manage infrastructure, I don't worry about software upgrades, I don't troubleshoot infrastructure, we take that same model and apply it to data in your data center, to the infrastructure in your data center for secondary storage. And so we take what looks like on the left and simplistically turn it into what looks like on the right and do it at scale. So how do we do this? What are the components of this? And so this is really the mechanics of how we do this. And first and foremost, we know a lot about file from our history. We've optimized our backup and archive environment for using file-based data. File is a lot different than, say, block or structured data. File systems are uneven. They have different size files. You don't get a uniform, crawl or walk across them. And so it's a much different environment managing data in a file system than it is, say, in a VM that has a fixed size with some change blocks reporting out of it through APIs. We do integrate with the leading, NAS providers, whether that's NetApp, Isilon, Pure FlashBlade, Cumulo, in terms of being able to integrate with their APIs to simplify the process of, creating permissions on exports and to take snapshots and release snapshots so we have consistent views. And then secondarily, we do a searchable index on ingest. So no more thinking about catalogs in the same way. This is really a model where we are moving data, and as data moves into Igneous, all that metadata comes with it attached to the file. And then we're taking that data and we're indexing it through a search interface, which means your index is now reconstructible at any time. And then we talk about the hybrid cloud model of, looking at the cloud as your new Iron Mountain, or looking at the cloud as the place for that long-tail data and to efficiently move that data into the cloud. When we talk about search, restore, migrate, we've flipped, on its head the capability that restore is not a browse through a path and a restore operation. Restore is you search, and where you find data is where you initiate the restore from. So it doesn't matter whether it's a file, whether it's a directory, whether it's an entire virtual view of a given backup. We have integrated as a top-level component here that search is your primary method for going through data. And this is really built around the fact that most people use Google today. I know even on my laptop, you don't browse for stuff anymore. I use search. And so we're just carrying that model through for data at scale, which is something that is a big challenge, but it's something that we said is got to sit on our platform and be able to, effectively let people be able to find that data. And when we talk about that backup model here and file system data, we do backup through standard protocols. The difference in what we're doing here is we talk about continuous backup. So a lot of our customers have, windows that they kind of try to squeeze in between 8 p.m. and, 6 a.m. in the morning. Our model for backup is really built around being latency aware. So we can have backups running at all times of the day, and we just use, a bunch of threads to go fan out on a given set of exports. And when we're doing that backup, we're constantly monitoring the latency of the systems we're backing up, and we'll scale down the number of threads based on what the system is doing so that we're not impacting your applications on your systems. And we've proved this with our customers. So a lot of our customers talk about no backup windows, getting rid of the things that impact performance on their source side system. So just think of this as a low-level movement of data, as systems get busy, as NAS systems get busy, or as they back off, and we're just filling that gap in performance and making sure that we're watching what's going on at all times. Of course, we have a rich data protection suite. So beyond just doing the tiering and replication to the cloud, we can also do it to another Igneous system. We have lifecycle management of data. We can version data, and that's how we do our backup model here, is with the versioning model. So we'll do a level 0, and then it's an incremental forever. So we're just pulling change data. And then through our search interfaces, we do kind of have a browse construct there, but each one of those incrementals is really a virtual view of the full at that point in time when it happened. So we're very space efficient in the back end, both in how we compress data and the data that we move. And then in our presentation layer of that, we are making sure that it looks like your file system at that moment. And then, of course, we have Worm, too, which is just the ability to protect that data from accidental deletion or purposeful deletion by, say, the administrative staff. Once you set Worm, our system will protect that data against all deletions and not allow people to, go override systems to go remove that data. And then let's talk about the tiering to cloud piece, because we have really two models that we're thinking here, which is if I'm backing up 100 million files, I can't put 100 million files off to the public cloud, because that will be $5,000 just in puts to the public cloud, which is not very efficient. And so what I have to do is I have to ingest all of this data, and then I have to effectively transport that data to the public cloud in a nice parallel bulk model here. And so what we've spent a lot of time thinking about is how do you effectively and efficiently move that data to the public cloud using APIs, using aggregation, using a lot of multi-threaded ways to do it. But then on that public cloud side, we kind of give you some options here. One of those options we believe in strongly is that data should be available for you in the public cloud. So we can encrypt it if you want it encrypted. If you just say, hey, that's the secondary copy, I want it encrypted. But the reality is we believe that the world is moving towards a place where workloads are going to start to span between on-prem and in-cloud. And how do you build that bridge between moving file-based data on-prem to the cloud, keeping it in the native format so that your applications can use it up in the cloud, or conversely, be able to get that data there and do restores into the public cloud for your DR. So kind of imagine the savings if I'm not standing up like-for-like infrastructure in 2 data centers. I know I have my data in the cloud, and any moment I can trigger a recovery into the public cloud and do DR there. And then this is the last piece of it, which is really delivered as a service. And so, we have built this from the ground up, that we have telemetry and metrics that are streaming up from our appliances, in the data centers. This is secure. We can go through audits with you on this, but we want you to think about how do you consume things through interfaces, not how to manage infrastructure. And so all of those event-based things that happen, so, something's going on with software, there's a bug, there's software upgrades, we handle all of that for you, and we do it automatically, and we do it programmatically. So we have in our management cloud a system that's watching over all of our devices, all of the fleet, and at all times it is making sure that everything is healthy on-premise, and if it's not, we start to set off pagers to our team to take a look at. And those people are engineers that wrote that code, that know what's going on, that know the metrics, that can go proactively mitigate any issues that are going on. And this has proven itself to be very advantageous to our customers, because you want secondary storage backup just to blend into the background. You just want to make sure it's working, and you want to know, is my data protected? All that other stuff is the stuff that we take on to make sure your environment is protected and safe, and we take care of all the headache of systems and infrastructure and software. So with that, I'll go through a demo. I hit the 10-minute mark so far, so I think I'm good. This demo is just a quick 5-minute demo, just giving you a sense of how this all works. Let me do a quick screen share here.
It's coming up.
Okay, good.
There we go.
That was tough. So let me just give you a quick view. So logging in, this is the Igneous cloud interface. You log into our management portal. This is taking all those metrics, and it's giving you a view of all those metrics on our systems. And so in that you can see, like, there are jobs that are running, there are threads that are doing these backups. You can see the throughput in. You'll see a throughput out in this case because we are actually doing active replication of the cloud. At this point, you get a sense of, like, the total files. But when we talk about doing this management, what we really want you to focus on is what's protected and what's not protected. And so what are the exports that we know about that we have protected on the system, and what are the ones that maybe you want to go set some policies on? The next two, like, graphs just really just give you some insights into what's going on. So, you know, data, what in a backup has changed, what is new, what is delete. You can focus in on those or highlight specific ones. You can do this at a 3-month view. You can do this at a 30-day view. And just get a sense as backup data is coming in, how much is new, how much is changed, and how much is delete. And then the bottom part is really about your data growth. So where is the data growing that's coming in? Is it in cloud? Is it on Igneous? Is it the data that we know about on your primary systems? And that's what this screen is all about here. As we move into backup, what we really want to talk about is policies. And this is the kind of core of what you do, which is you create some policies. We have default policies such as gold, silver, bronze. We have worm, which is, you know, that protection method. There's replication associated with the cloud or other systems. Policies really just define frequency, retention, and replication. That's what a policy is here. And so very simple to take a look at them, very simple to create new ones. I pick a schedule. I pick a retention here. I decide if I want to enable worm or not worm. I then decide if I want to replicate it. And in this case, I'm going to just pick this Igneous. This is Azure. Once I select our Igneous account in Azure, you'll get the different types of services you can replicate to. And then we'll set some smart defaults on those policy names, but you can always override that. And you can put in whatever you want on those given policies. And so if you want to say, well, this is my Azure cool blob replication, I can then go create that policy. You'll get a view at the bottom, which you can click on that, and that'll take you over to the systems. So once I have my policy set up, I need to go discover my systems. And so these are the NetApp and the Isilon, the Cumulo, the FlashBlades that I have an understanding of, or even just generic NAS. And setup is simply a matter of, hey, you do a drop-down, you select what you want to import, you give the management interface of that system. And so this is where we are going to use some temporary credentials. We are going to log into this system. We are going to simplify all those tasks of setting export permissions, of creating snapshots, of deleting snapshots for you in this backup process. And so now you'll see, okay, we found the system. We discovered 3 exports. These are test systems. These are all on-prem here. Once I see those 3 exports, I'm going to go ahead and import this system, and this is the Data O2 system. And so now you're going to see here's this Data O2 system. It's on Isilon. Here's the exports. Here's the policies associated with it. I can then go in and I can add my policy I had, which is just Azure Cool Blob Replication. Once that policy is set, I can go view the activity associated with it. And now here's everything that's kind of happening at this point in time. So I have combinations of backup jobs. I have replication jobs. I mean, replication jobs are just this continuous thing that runs. Backup jobs have more of a finite life associated with them. And so, you know, here in this screen, it'll give you both progress of how many files it's processed or how much its capacity is processed. It'll tell you what policies applied. And then this pop-up just came up, which will say, hey, look, this job that you just set with this policy, it is now queued up and ready to run. And so this job will go through setting up the export permissions, creating the snapshot, and then it'll start to run also. I'm going to go click into a replication job. So to give you an example of, we also keep track of where data is located. So in this export, that was a replication job. You can see that data is both on Igneous and Azure. And this data in the middle of replication right now, so it's probably not all up to date. And I know it's not because I started this replication. And so if I just do a quick search for some data in here, you can see in real time, some of this data is just on Igneous still, but some of this data is in both places. And as you get to restore, you can pick the location from where you want to pull that data from. And I click in the details, and this just gives you all the metadata and shows that all the metadata is attached to this also. There's a backup view here, which just gives us the history of this. Here's your kind of browse view associated with this. I think what's more intriguing, though, besides that, is really give you a view of what it would look like to both, grab something, download it, just to say how would I find something. So here I'm going to search for construction and MP4. We had some construction here, which we were videotaping over the course of a couple months. You can see I have all the data associated with it. I can download that right from here if I want to. This is only on Igneous. I can go back, and I can go back to my backup view here now. So I ran two backups. I'm only storing my level 0 and incremental, and you can see at the first one I ran, I had just the data. The second one, I added this directory called time-lapse photos, and at any point I can go back and forth, and you can kind of see the history of this evolve over time through the backups. And this will cover changes, deletes, all of that will come in. Moving forward, I just want to give you what does a long backup look like, so multiple iterations of this. And so now you can see I just went and searched for Igneous, so we have that buried in our directory tree. I'll go click back, and now you can see here's something that's been running since November 28th. And you'll just see the history of that over time. And I can go restore any one of these virtual versions here, and that'll be a full backup, or I can go into any one of these directories and restore that directory at that point in time, at that directory level, and it knows where it came from, and it'll let you restore that back to where it came from, or you can pick a new destination. Pretty simple. Management, straightforward. This is all as a service. There's not a lot of tuning. There's not a lot of tweaking here. It is really just, here's some logs, here's some systems, here's some policies, go, and we will let you know what's happening through this. And so that's the whole demo here. So hopefully that gave you a good view. If you have any more questions on that, please just let us know, igneous.io. We're more than happy to share, kind of the better details about this and maybe give a little bit longer demo associated with this. So
yeah, great presentation. Great presentation, Christian. I love seeing the live demo. I'm afraid we've run out of time for doing a live Q&A, but there's a number of good questions that have come in from the audience here. If you don't mind checking those out, some really good questions about how the product works. So thank you for sharing the live demo with us, and thanks for being on.
Thank you.
All right, for more information on Igneous, visit igneous.io, and also check out the resource there on your console. If you have questions for Christian about how the solution works, go ahead and ask them now, and we'll be routing those over to Christian for him to answer those directly. And so now it's time for our first grand prize drawing. We'll be giving away grand prize number 1 and grand prize number 2, which are two $1,500 Amazon gift cards, as well as another Amazon $500 gift card. So we got 3 gift cards to give away. And while I announce the prize winners for those gift cards, I'm going to pop up this question on the screen, and that is, would you like to be one of the first to learn more about the Igneous Hybrid Cloud Storage and Data Protection Solution? So I'll just leave that on the screen for you to answer. And the next prize winners on today's Storage Megacast, the first grand prize is going to Jesse Tran of Minnesota. That's a $1,500 gift card. The second grand prize is going to Naveen Dondapati, Dondapati, from Oregon. That's another Amazon $1,500 gift card. And then the next Amazon $500 gift card is going to Nathan Reynolds from Oregon. So congratulations to all of you. We will announce those prize winners' names there in the questions box on your console. If you have any confusion or questions or didn't quite hear the names, they'll be popping up on your console there in just a minute. We'll also be announcing those over on Twitter with the hashtag StorageMegacast. All right, if you haven't answered that question on your screen, please do it now. because the Megacast is moving on. I'm now excited to introduce Ron Martin, who is a global solutions architect from Veeam, and Mike Doran, who is a director of worldwide IBM data retention infrastructure and tape storage solutions. So welcome, Veeam and IBM.
Thank you, David, very much. So this is Mike Duran. As mentioned, I'm the worldwide tape sales director for IBM. I spend a lot of time talking with customers, with partners about something that's near and dear to my heart, and that's IBM tape, as well as the economics of tape. And so I spend a lot of time focused on the building blocks, which I think are the tape drives. That's where the data hits the media. And then as well as the tape libraries, the automation platforms where the tape drives and the media reside. So I should start by, Ron, just saying, one, thanks to you and the Veeam team. I know we have a lot of collaboration, a lot of work that we're doing together, and so it's, as I said, excited to be a part of this and to talk about a topic that's really, I think, near and dear to my heart. I've been doing it a long time, and I think it's a really strategic platform as we move forward.
Yeah, we're happy to be a part.
All right, so what I thought I would do is kind of start with, I thought a great place to start might be, what do we see taking place in the industry? So what's driving IBM's, I think, commitment, investment, and innovation around tape, right? There's a lot of thought in the marketplace and I've been doing it for a long time, that tape's kind of old and crusty and kind of dead, but nothing could be further than the truth. And what I thought I'd spend just a couple minutes on to set the stage is, so what do we see in the market? What's driving our investment and our innovation? And I see a lot of dynamics. Number one is this data explosion that we're all experiencing. You've all seen all the charts. This chart says 2.5 billion gigabytes of data created a day. I'm sure you have a chart or seen a chart where the arrow just points straight up to the right and they say it's growing exponentially. And that seems to be the case in a lot of ways, driven a lot by mobility. A lot of us probably, even when we wake up, before we get out of bed, we grab our phone. We're using the phone for applications, texting, whatever it might be, but we're creating data. And that's the first major challenge for all of us. IDC projects that in 2025, 180 zettabytes of data will be in the digital universe. That's just an incredible amount of data. They also projected, by the way, last year in 2016 that there were 4 million searches on Google every second. They estimated that there were 350,000 tweets a second. And then in the U.S. alone, they said there were 3.5 million texts per second. So it's just an absolutely enormous amount of data. And I think kind of a little bit of the scary part is we're really historically awful at projecting data growth rates, and we're always kind of, I think, low. There was a gentleman in 1977, Ken Olsen. Some of you may remember that name. Many probably don't know. He was the founder and CEO of DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation, long time gone organization. But in 1977, Ken Olsen said, quote, "There's no reason for any individual to have a computer in their home." Somebody you might actually be more familiar with, Steve Ballmer at Microsoft, said in 2007, there's no chance the iPhone is going to get any significant market share. No chance, end quote. So obviously these predictions are way off. And by the way, the scary news is we're not any better at it at predicting data growth rates. The LTO portfolio of products came into the market in the early 2000s, and at that time, the consortium, as well as our media partners, were projecting growth rates. And in fact, Santa Clara Computing Group with Fuji in 2001 projected that in 2008 we would have shipped 2,400 petabytes of capacity in LTO tape. And in fact, when the dust settled on 2008, we'd shipped 11,000 petabytes of capacity. And the point I'm trying to make here is we see the data explosion. I think we're massively underestimating the amount of growth that we're going to see in the industry. The other dynamic then is we're trying to manage and figure out all this data is the economics. So everybody I talk to effectively has flat budgets. If they don't have a flat budget, they've got a budget that maybe is going 2, 3, 4, 5%, but in no way, shape, or form is it keeping up with the amount of data growth that we're trying to manage. And so that becomes the challenge. Now, in data dynamics, we tend to get a little bit of a break here because it's estimated 80% of the data is untouched after 90 days. And in fact, UC Santa Barbara recently did a study where they looked at smaller organizations. They were managing 22 to say 100 terabytes of capacity, and they estimated that actually 90% of the data isn't touched after 90 days. And they also determined that about 6.5% of the data, they said they termed it as cool data, meaning it was touched one time after 90 days. And so that starts to give us, I think, a little bit of a lever to use as we start to manage this data growth. The other great lever is IBM tape, right? Because tape's 1/10 the cost of disk storage. So this rapidly becomes a conversation around obviously cost and efficiency, but it also becomes a conversation around data management. And when I think about data management, I think about data optimization kind of through its life cycle. So as we create data, it's hot, maybe it's mission critical applications. We need flash or disk to drive the performance requirements. But now as that data starts to age in time, it starts to lose its access density. Its access much less. I guess one way to say it is it starts to sort of lose its data value. And when it does that, then we think it ought to start to work its way through a storage hierarchy into the highest scalable, lowest cost platform, and that's tape. And that's the driver of tape. It's absolutely relevant. And you almost can think of it as being kind of a relief valve as you start to struggle with data growth in your tier one environments. So the other thing I'd probably say is, right, everybody's heard that the tape is dead, et cetera. Actually, today's tape is, well, effectively it's modern. It's a platform that we're still inventing on. We're innovating on. In fact, in 2016, IBM was granted 16 patents only on tape read-write heads and servo track technology. And I mention that because this is the technology that allows us to drive massive data density into tape cartridges. And so you probably saw in October we announced LTO-8. So the media for LTO-8 is a 12 terabyte cartridge capacity. LTO-7 was 6 terabytes. And so this innovation, the ability to drive higher density into tape media cartridge, this is what's going to continue to advantage from a cost perspective tape over all the other technologies. By the way, including cloud. I do a lot of TCO studies now with cloud storage, and tape is, frankly, it's an order of magnitude less expensive than cloud and disk storage. And so this is what's driving our innovation. In August of last year in our Zurich Research Lab, we demonstrated with one of our media partners, Sony, the ability to put 201 gigabits of data on every square inch of media. So that sounds like a whole bunch of scientific numbers. What that translates to all of us is that in the future, in the next, say, 10 to 12 years, we're going to have a tape media cartridge that will have 330 terabytes of capacity on it, natively uncompressed. And so when you start thinking about massive, back to the first slide with the dynamics, right, the data explosion and cost, this is absolutely a way to start to drive a technology to take advantage of that and start to address some of those challenges. So we're going to be the lowest form of data storage for the future. We don't see that ending. We have a long roadmap of density ahead of us. And so we're not only high capacity and low cost, but we're also reliable. I think a lot of people still have this picture in their mind of tape, of people moving in and out of tapes, mounting tape drives. They've got this, the old VCR at home where you take that old tape out in the old days and the tape would get stuck in there. Actually, tape is super reliable. Very few people physically move tape media, short of some interchange requirements, or maybe taking it off-site. Hopefully it's encrypted for security, but taking it off-site. Otherwise, all the mounting of tape is done in the automation platforms. But from a reliability perspective, tape is an order of 10 to the 19th power, and the closest disk technology from a reliability perspective is a SAS SSD drive, which is 10 to the 17th power. So we're orders of magnitude more reliable. We're also fast. That LTO tape drive I mentioned does 360 megabytes per second, uncompressed. And so in many cases, if you're in a streaming environment where you're streaming a backup or you're streaming archive data, in many cases, the tape will wait for the disk. And so a lot of advantages, still very, very relevant. We're removable. We're green. Obviously, putting a cartridge on a shelf or a slot in a library takes no power. And I think more and more important today is just security. With all the ransomware attacks we see, with all the hacking attacks we see, tape provides us air gap type technology where it's just offline to the network and you can't hack the data. So that's what's driving our market. That's what's driving our innovation on tape, and this is why we're continuing to invest in tape technology. So let me turn it over now to Ron for some comments.
Hey, so thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. So if you're familiar with Veeam's history with tape, you know that to some degree, when we were founded, we sort of bought into this whole notion that, tape is dead, and for some time we didn't support tape natively. However, due to customer demand and, honestly, just the continued relevance of tape, we added tape support, 2 major revs ago, and we're actually continuing to evolve our capabilities, which we'll talk about some of those over the course of the next couple slides. Because at Veeam, our intent is to provide, a comprehensive, enterprise grade, backup and recovery solution, and tape is really integral to that. So if you've ever been around, many Veeam people, you've probably heard them refer to this whole notion of a 3-2-1 rule. So, obviously, a backup is light years ahead of no backup, of course, but in terms of, best practices around managing your backups, we look at this 3-2-1 rule as, we want 3 different copies of your backups, somewhere, right? So we want redundancy. We want high availability for your backups, as like you have high availability for other components of your IT infrastructure. Ideally, 2 different types of media, which tape obviously fits great in that, and then one off-site. So of course, in the case of a natural disaster or the like, you are covered. And then we do have an interesting, I think, corollary to the rule, which is kind of evolved over the past couple of years, particularly in the light of, like Mike mentioned, the ransomware threat, right? So we want one air-gapped backup, or we want one offline backup. Now, honestly, there are a couple different ways to do this. I mean, so within Veeam, we have this notion of a rotated drive where, if we're landing backups onto some disk and the disk goes away, if the little box is checked that says it's rotated, we'll just start a new backup chain rather than airing out the backup job. Or, we have heard of some customers that, they've played around with, I'm just going to take my primary backup storage offline, except during the backup window. And, you could do that, right? For rotated drives, you're going to have I think you're going to have a pretty difficult time scaling that unless you're, fairly, your IT infrastructure is fairly small, plugging in USB drives or the like. Plus there's, the manual process of doing it. And then for taking, your primary backup storage on and offline, and synchronizing that with your backup windows and all that. I mean, it's really a big, DIY proposition. So with, you probably have to script that a lot and do whatever. So, our disposition is that, tape is, the most scalable, proven, trusted technology that you can invest in for these air gap backups. So how does tape fit into, your standard issue Veeam environment? So if you're familiar with our solution, it's fairly simple. I mean, obviously we primarily back up virtual. We do have physical agents now. We're not here to talk about those today. You have your Veeam backup server, or you may have a few servers depending on how much aggregate data you want to move, and then you have a backup repository. So then how does tape fit with that? Well, the way it fits is pretty simple. I mean, in keeping with our general disposition to simple software, right? So what you do in a Veeam environment to add tape, you would simply designate, your Windows tape server. It's physically Fiber Channel or SAS connected to your tape drive. We would support a nice SCSI presentation as well. You physically connect your server to your tape library. Then within the Veeam console, you would simply point Veeam at your tape server and tell it is a tape server, and it will deploy all of the necessary components, our Veeam data mover, and all the other pieces that we need. And then what we're able to do is we're able to go and interrogate the library for number of drives, number of slots, and then we can create our media pools and all the things that we need to start landing backups from your backup repository onto tape. So it's a fairly simple flow, and then the restore process is fairly similar. We can go into that maybe if you guys have specific questions about that maybe at the end. It's important to know that with this, I mentioned before that we implemented tape in version 7. We're currently on version 9, working on version 10. And it wasn't that we just implemented and then we checked the box and we moved on. We have been continuing to evolve the solution. So for instance, a couple of things that we added within the V9 timeframe were, parallel processing. So before, if you designated a pool of tapes and media, and even if you had multiple drives in your tape library, we did more or less a serial single drive approach. Now with the version 9, if you have multiple drives in your tape library, we're gonna leverage all of the drives possible to write your backup jobs to, so we can dramatically speed up, take advantage not only of the speed of the tape drives themselves, but also we can do parallel processing with those. We can also do something that we couldn't do before, which was a direct restore. So in the past, what you had to do to restore from tape, if you had a VM that you wanted to pull back off tape, you had to actually stage it back into your Veeam backup repository. Now with V9, you can take that tape backup, and restore it directly to your production, vSphere or Hyper-V production VM storage. We also have the ability to do file to tape. If you guys have questions about that, we can talk about those in a bit. But anyway, that's just I wanted to give you a quick view of how simple it is to get integrate tape with Veeam, and it's just another backup type. Like if you're familiar with Veeam, creating a new backup job. So there are a number of fairly compelling use cases. I mean, we see with Cape. Obviously, keeping an air gap backup. That's a huge one. Archival. So one of the other facilities that we support with our tape solution is what we call grandfather, father, son backups, where you can specify yearly, quarterly, monthly, some number of weekly backups, all maintained over the course of time. So giving that longer term retention natively from the Veeam console has been significant, and with a view of evolving this for new customers, we have a class of a partner we call VCSPs. They're our actual service providers, which provide backup as a service, replication as a service to maybe like an on-prem Veeam customer. Well, one of the things that they've requested, and one of the things that we will bring to market sometime soon, is tape out. So all these VCSPs that are currently taking customer backups to disk, we're also going to create a tape out capability for those, so that you can your cloud provider can archive your backups onto tape the same way you could on-prem through our VCSP. And I know Mike has some other interesting use cases as well.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I would just comment on the cloud. It was interesting because in the theme of is tape really still relevant? There was quite some time some commentary that tape is the cloud is the new tape, and a kind of a funny thing happened on the way to the cloud, right? Tape is there, and it's there because it's high scalable, it's super low cost. So you still see small CSPs as well as the very largest CSPs, Google, Microsoft Azure. Azure runs on IBM tape, and they're doing that because of the reliability, the scalability, and the cost that it provides. So while tape still does the traditional backup archiving, obviously long-term retention, it's starting to work its way into some of these new use cases. We see it with digital video surveillance as well, which is super high data that typically gets very cold after about 14 days, and so they start to stage that data off to the tape platform so they can keep it for low cost and for super long periods of time. We talked a little bit about tiered storage, about data optimization. It's starting to fit there as well. Customers are really starting to roll out and take advantage of policy-based data movement. So as that data starts to get cold, but there's so much data, it's such a dynamic environment, there's so much data growth that you just can't keep up with it. So they build the policy engines or take advantage of the policy engines. And as that data starts to age, they just naturally start to move that tape data down to that lowest cost tier. That does a lot of things. It helps performance of the Tier 1 systems, and it starts to free up some of that capacity, and so there's a lot of cost avoidance there as well. And Ron, you mentioned security. The Wall Street Journal had an article in September, I think September 19th or 17th, talking about how because of the ransomware attacks, there's an estimated 4,000 ransomware attacks a day, that organizations kind of worldwide are taking another look at tape because it's got that capability to get that data offline and frankly make it unhackable. Short of a malicious act by an employee, but as far as somebody accessing the data over the network, it's really impossible to hack. So lots of use cases, and the use cases are growing more and more, kind of really driven by this massive amount of data growth and cost challenges that customers have. So as we look at it, as Ron and I and the teams work together, we think we're bringing together just two fantastic market-leading offerings. And we're pulling these together into an elegant solution for not only backup recovery archive, but for also some of the air gap and the other capabilities that it brings to the table. Bottom line, it'll drive significant cost and economics benefits into the organizations. I haven't done a TCO yet where tape's not an order of magnitude less expensive than the other alternative platforms. And again, we talked about security challenges. That kind of is actually moving its way up to the top of the list with all the malicious attacks that take place. So great for your business, but also great for your long-term IT strategy. Tape is, as I said, it's the media, the life span on the media is estimated at 30 years. Clearly, you'll probably want to migrate the technology forward over that period of time, but the media is warranted for 30 years, or is a lifespan of 30 years. We warranty it for 10, and so we're extremely confident in the reliability. And what you'll get, as Ron said, is you're going to get consistent and easily scalable performance. And so as your backups, your archives, your applications start to require more performance, it could be as simple as adding another tape drive. If that was LTO-8, you just added another in a parallel write. You just added another 360 megabytes per second of performance. And it's easy to manage, right? So it just becomes, frankly, a tier of your storage environment, a tier of your storage hierarchy, and a low-cost storage tier, which is the ideal platform for some of that inactive and less active data. So that's a quick update on the innovations and the synergy between the two solutions and what we're doing together. Ron, I'll take the slide bottom up, but if you need to know or want to know more about IBM Tape Solutions, that's a hot link. So just click that. That'll take you to the front porch or the portal for everything around IBM Tape. And if you have questions, unfortunately, I have two email addresses. But if you have questions, email tapegps@us.ibm.com. If you would, give me your name, contact information, where you're located, and kind of the question, and I'll make sure that we get the right folks in connection with you so we can answer your questions.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a whole team answering IBM at veeam.com. So feel free to submit questions there as well.
Mike and Ron, great presentation. Thank you. We do have some questions for you from the audience.
Okay.
So let's see here. The first one is, what about the lifespan of tape versus, they're saying SD?
So from a media perspective, we believe the lifespan will be unmatched. I mean, we do have customers that have tape automation platforms that have been installed for 15 years. A lot of that media is still in use. So we believe the lifespan will be advantaged. We also think the density, and as we innovate on the platform, we're going to continue to widen this gap between capacity as well as cost. And so, look, we just think this is a long-term strategic platform for a lot of, customers now are saving a lot of data. They don't want to delete anything, and they want to maintain the data. Maybe an analytics engine's change, and they want to go back and relook at some of that old data. It's the ideal platform for long-term retention of data that they can then go back and access at a later point in time.
Okay. And while we answer some more audience questions, I'm going to pop up this poll question on the screen. For those out there in the audience, would you like to be one of the first to learn more about the joint IBM Veeam data protection solution? And I'll leave that up. Another question here. You talked about predictions at the start of your presentation. So here's a prediction that Ed is asking you to make. How long do you think tape will be around for?
So the density roadmap that I talked about, right, in Zurich in August, we demonstrated 201 gigabits per square inch. So we believe the roadmap, before we started running into technology challenge on density, is 10 to 15 years just on media. And so we are on track. We're doubling this. And this is not, this isn't like a white paper. In one of those early slides, when it says tape relevant, there was a little picture of a drive. That's actually the drive in Zurich. It's on a workbench that we did the demonstration of the 201 gigabits per square inch. So we have a roadmap of density for the next 10 to 15 years. And so, man, it's hard to predict anything in the future, but we've got a built roadmap for 15 years. So I think it's got a very long life. What I actually think is happening in the market, and we're seeing this with all flash environments, is flash from a capacity and now a cost perspective with compression and deduplication is starting to really hit the top of the disk environments. So one of the things I always tell customers is I think back 15, 20 years ago, many people on the phone are probably, it was way before your time, but in the old days when we had storage, we had disk, we had optical storage, and we had tape. And by and large, optical went away. No matter what decision criteria you used, optical lost. Either lost to the high end on disk or lost on the low end to tape. And this is Mike Durant speaking, I actually think this is happening again. We have flash, we have disk, and we have tape. And I think disk is going to get squeezed. And so I think we're going to end up in these environments that have flash. We already see all flash environments. We'll have flash and we'll have tape for that economy storage.
Cool. And for those out there who are interested in Veeam, the Veeam and IBM solution that we're talking about today, what's the best way for them to get started? I mean, I would think with Veeam they can download an evaluation, but how do they purchase the solutions separately, or do they purchase them from a single source?
Yeah, I mean, from a Veeam perspective, it's all in our software. So, yeah.
Yeah, and for tape, we would work with the Veeam channel partners or the IBM partners if there's maybe not one engaged, and then integrate with Ron and his team to provide the tape technology platform to tie in and attach to the Veeam implementation.
Okay.
I think the last thing I'd say to those on board is that I mean, it's a super scalable solution. So as Ron and I and the teams have worked on this, I mean, you can start with a tape configuration that's 3U, literally 3U, one drive, and one cartridge. And if that was an LTO tape, that would be 12 terabytes of capacity uncompressed. And then you could scale that same solution in that same 19-inch rack, so one 19-inch rack, up to 21U, 21 drives, and up to 3.3 petabytes native uncompressed. So, look, you can start small and grow as your capacity requirements grow.
Excellent. Well, great presentation. Thank you, Meg. Thank you, Ron. Thank you to Veeam and IBM.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
For more information on Veeam and IBM, visit or download the resource there in your handout in your resource console. Just click on that PDF. You can learn more, and hopefully you've answered the question that's on their screen there about would you like to be one of the first to learn more about the joint Veeam IBM data protection solution. I'll just leave that up while I announce our next Amazon $500 gift card winner. Gift card number 5 for an Amazon $500 gift card is going to Dan Mente, Mente, from New Jersey. Congratulations, Dan. We've got a lot more gift cards to give away still on the event today. All right. And with that, the Enterprise Storage Megacast is moving on. I'm excited to introduce our next presenter. That is Mark Keating. He's a Senior Director of Technology and Strategic Alliances at Clear Sky. Mark, are you there?
I am.
Thanks for being on the Megacast.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. All right. So
tell us about Clear Sky.
Yeah, thanks. So what's interesting about what we do is a little bit different than a lot of other technologies that you'll hear about or have been listening to out in the market there. And if I kind of summarize in one sentence of what we're doing, kind of our main mission in life, right, is to eliminate secondary storage forever. I mean, there's a lot of momentum and discussion in the marketplace around making copies of data and having secondary copies of data and why you may choose to do that. And there's a lot of good reasons why people do that. But the whole reason why you would do that is because you need to store your data somewhere, right? So you would buy your primary SAN if you're doing it physically on-premise. And there's a whole lot of stuff that comes along with that, with encryption software and snapshot software and host integration kits and all kinds of things like that. Or if you're in the cloud, right, you would attach a storage instance to your cloud compute instance, and then you do that for your first copy of data. Now, everyone has to create a first copy of data somewhere because you're creating your data and you're storing it. Everything else that you do is an insurance policy, right? So what ends up happening is you end up making a second copy of your data, right? And so, what's interesting about secondary storage is there's a lot of different ways to define what that could be. That could be your backup environment. That could be your second copy. That could be your replication copy. There's a lot of different options around what secondary storage means. And so if you take a look at, where backing up and why you would back things up, you do that for the single sole reason of something has gone wrong in your primary environment. And this might be protecting against ransomware. This might be protecting against something that, for example, went wrong, something that disappeared, somebody deleted a file, whatever that happens to be, right? When you look at your secondary copy of storage, right, you're either putting it on-premise or in the cloud, so you're paying for another copy of data. You're paying for software to move that second copy of data over to the location, wherever it happens to be, and you may or may not be paying for a network link when you do that. Likewise, if you go to restore something, right, you may pay for a retrieve charge if you're getting it from a cloud-based environment, or you may pay for network links or whatever it is when they come along with that, or you may pay to host it, on your on-prem environment. And likewise, if you start looking at disaster recovery and add that on top of your backup environment, now I said, well, I've got my first site, so I made one copy, then I made a second copy to protect against something going wrong, and then on my third environment, right, what ended up happening is, I made a whole copy of that environment to another physical location. So I've done a DR copy. Now I've bought another set of primary storage, put it in my secondary location. I may make a DR copy of my backup environment. So what ends up happening here is you make lots and lots of copies of data. So even if you have dedupe and compression and you say you're getting, I'm going to pick a number, don't hold me to it. Let's say you get 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 or whatever your ratio is. Let's say you get 4-to-1 to pick an example, right? So if I get 4-to-1 dedupe and compression on my primary storage and then I make 4 copies of my data, now I'm back to no dedupe and compression from a net effective perspective if you look at your cost of storage, right? So what ends up happening in this world, and this is the world that all of us live in and have lived in for a long time, right, is that you're making lots of copies of your data, and the reason you're doing that is to protect against something going wrong with the primary copy of your environment. That fundamental premise has driven lots of storage technologies, lots of backup technologies, lots of replication technologies for a couple of decades, and I'm showing my gray hair here now, because having been around for a while, I've done a lot of these architectures from why and how you would do that. When we started Clear Sky Data, and I've been here since before the first round of funding at Clear Sky Data, so we're going on almost 5 years now, right? We took a look at this concept and said that there has to be a better way to solve these challenges. And so what we do fundamentally is we deliver a managed service that enables our customers to have primary on-demand storage, and we include offsite backup and DR at no extra cost. That's really what we're doing here at Clear Sky Data. So we're a manufacturer, and we deliver this to end-user customers. From a conceptual perspective, our end-user customers pay to store their data once. So you're only paying for one copy of your data, rather than paying to create 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or however many copies of your data you're doing, right, from however many vendors you have, whether it's your primary storage vendor and your secondary storage vendor and your backup software vendor and your disk or tape drive vendor or your object cloud vendor or whatever it is. With our environment, you pay for one copy from your perspective, right? We handle everything under the covers, and what that means is we eliminate the need for you to buy, pay, purchase for, or manage any other secondary storage copy that's out there. That could be your backup copies, your DR copies, or anything else, because we're handling that all for you. And so what usually happens, in this environment is when I say that, I get asked, well, how does that work, right? And so what we do is we provide a managed service, as I mentioned before. We deliver that service to our customer's premise. Now, I've put a diagram up here that shows 2 physical on-premise sites, but this could just as easily be a cloud premise site. Doesn't really matter to us. We will run some network gear inside of our customer's environment. It's a small little 2U appliance that can scale if we need to, and that's all flash. And what ends up happening is that we're storing on our customers' environments copies of the hottest and most frequently accessed data in their environment. We then have an entire private managed network behind the scenes that stores data in different locations based on the compute resources and what your applications require, so that you always get the performance that you need inside your application. Now, we can then connect you up to any public cloud compute environment as well. So this, as I mentioned before, can be either done physically on-premise or with public cloud compute. To us, it's the exact same technology, so it doesn't really matter whether you want to run your application on-premise or in the cloud. We will store your data in our network. We will make lots of copies of it. We will geographically disperse those copies. We will store different copies in different object stores. All of this happens under the covers so that you don't have to make more copies. You don't have to worry about moving data between one site or another site. You don't have to worry about replicating data between the 2 sites. And you don't really have to worry about what's going on from a perspective of making different copies. Sorry, something seemed to have happened with the slide, so I'll just hit the button again. And so what's happening here is that really when you store data inside the Clear Sky network, We are protecting it for you. We are making it available for you. We are making it so that you can access your data wherever you want to go ahead and access your data from. We're handling all the performance needs. We're handling your security needs. And we're handling all of your backup and recovery needs. Now, by doing that, when I start talking about what that really means, right, there are things that we include at no extra charge. For example, we include our ability to automatically back up virtual machines in the VMware environment. You could think other hypervisors as well, but this is an example from VMware where you may have looked at a screen like this from pick your vendor out there, and they'll say, hey, it looks really similar to insert vendor here, right? I back my virtual machines up, I make another copy somewhere else, I can restore a point in time, for whatever reason. I can, restore a file, roll back a whole virtual machine, whatever you want. With ClearSky, this just comes along with the service. So this doesn't cost you anything extra. What happens is because we're making all the copies under the covers, we're simply just handling that for you. You can then choose to recover a virtual machine, a group of virtual machines, an individual file, whatever you want, either at the same location where it was created or at a different location. That's just built into our service, once again, because we're running a network under the covers that handles that for you. So what's really interesting about this is that some of our customers who are using this, right, when they actually go through and we sit down with them and say, well, when you use ClearSky, what do I actually replace and what do I get out of it, right? So with us, right, we're replacing everything that I'm showing here on the screen. We're replacing primary storage area network, your secondary storage area network, any WAN connections between the two sites, replication software, and the list goes on and on here, right? So any backup environment, traditional archive environment, all of these things, when our customers look at our value prop, all of them are replaced by a single managed service that simply handles that for you. Now, this is our own technology we built under the covers. So we're not taking somebody else's technology, marking it up, and selling it to you at some inflated rate. This is actually designed from scratch technology that we built ourselves, right? And what we're doing really is we're making lots of copies in different object stores. And if you have a preference, we can make it either on-premise or in the cloud. But if you don't have a preference, we'll simply manage it for you, right? And so that when we do this, right, what ends up happening is all of your data is securely stored in different locations. And when you get that, you simply can choose where and how you want to access your data. We also deliver this in a OpEx model. So our customers only pay for the amount of storage that they're using. So one of the things that come along with this is that, if you look at, what tends to waste a lot of money and space and time is I had to buy, I'll pick one, I had to buy a giant tape drive, or I had to buy a bunch of storage in the cloud or wherever it is, and I don't know if I'm really using all of that, right? And so what ends up happening is you pay for all this capacity that you're not using, right? You may have bought it for performance reasons. You may have bought it for scalability reasons. You may have bought it so that, hey, it takes us 4 weeks to get this stuff shipped out to my physical environment, and that's just our procurement process, never mind what it takes from a shipping and logistics perspective. And so you may have bought ahead of demand, right? And so we can deliver this either on-premise, meaning inside your data center, or we can deliver this in the cloud, right? Now, this is not a software-only sale. This is actually a managed service sale. So what happens is that when you engage with ClearSky data, we actually will deliver this to you as a managed service. We will physically ship appliances. We will physically run network lines if it's the on-premise mode. If you're in the cloud, we will connect into your, for example, if you're on Amazon, it'll be your virtual private cloud, or your virtual environment inside Google Cloud, for example, or whatever cloud provider you happen to be using. And we do all of that work for you. What you see out of it is what looks like an iSCSI or a fiber channel target if you're running block, or you see a NFS or a SMB target if you're running NAS, so that way you can put data into the service and retrieve data back from the service. And so all the data that you put inside the ClearSky environment is always encrypted at all times. Now, what's interesting about that is that if you look at data from a availability perspective, in a lot of different solutions, if you have, let's say, primary storage and backup and DR and other places, you may have one encryption solution for your primary storage, another encryption solution for while you transmit data, a third encryption solution for where you're putting data somewhere else, a fourth encryption solution for replication, and so on and so forth. With us, that seems overly complicated, so what we did was when you store data inside of our environment, we automatically encrypt it from the minute it comes into our environment. The customers, meaning our end user customers, always control the encryption keys. We have no access to your data. That's done by design. In fact, the very first question you get asked when we set the service up is, what do you want your encryption keys to be? Let's go ahead and create what we call a security passphrase to secure your data. Now, our end user customers create that. We don't have access to that, and that was by design so that all data is always encrypted at rest in flight with encryption keys that are under our end users' customers' control, right? So what's interesting is that there's no concept of turning this off inside of our service. And in fact, when you go to manage the service from a web-based portal, we have mandatory two-factor authentication. That also is not optional, and it's something we build into our environment. So data is encrypted both in transit and at rest. We actually layer on multiple different layers of encryption keys on top of that, and that's just something that we do automatically. You don't have to take a look at that. The final thing I did want to mention on the security side is that all data is also always ran over private Ethernet lines. On behalf of our customers, we run and maintain a whole network of private Ethernet lines, and so when we connect you into our environment, everything is ran across private Ethernet connections. Nothing is ran over the public internet, so there's no transmitting of data over your wide area public internet connection. We actually run dedicated Ethernet lines that support nothing but our service, and that's just part of our managed service. And so that just comes along with it, and so that's just built in automatically to what we have, right? So from the security perspective, we're also, sorry, I lied, there's one more thing I forgot to mention. We're actually undergoing a SOC 2 audit that will be complete in about a week and a half. And so we have attestation reports that will be available January, February to our end user customers that verify everything I just said from an architectural perspective. And so what's interesting about that is that, we have a number of customers who, and I should probably have put this up here, so forgive me, who are using us for different things. So we have HIPAA-compliant customers in the healthcare space. We have Special Olympics. We have, you can see the folks here on the screen, right? I've just highlighted a few cases who are using us for different things, right? So we're dealing with HIPAA-compliant data. We're dealing with PCI data. We're dealing with financial services data. We're dealing with video recording data. All of that was built in from the security model that we did a few years ago, back when we were in beta before we went GA. So we've been generally available for a couple of years now, and a number of customers are using us for a lot of different use cases, right? So from a durability perspective, because we're storing data, by default we store data in public object stores, and so the durability on all of those are somewhere in the 11 to 13 nines of durability. So the idea there is, because we're making lots of copies, right, we leverage that durability from a protection perspective. So I've been asked if I want to make more copies, can I do that? The answer is certainly. If that's something that people want to talk about, contact me offline. Happy to have that conversation. For some folks, that's not enough. But for most people, making 11 to 13 nines of durability, geographically dispersed in several different regions, that's usually enough. But we do have the capability to do more if people have a hard requirement for that. We also have the capability, if somebody really wants to use a private object store, we can do that. The one thing I'll say about that is, by using a private object store, whoever owns the object store is then responsible for the durability and the multiple copies, right? So while we can do that technically, and we have done that with several of our partners and several of our customers, the conversation usually shifts a little bit in terms of making sure you have enough copies created, making sure you have enough geographic disbursement of the location of those copies. Our technology certainly supports it. It's a matter of making sure that we can meet our SLA to our end user customers, which is really what we sell. It's really an SLA around our managed service. And so the solution, what we're offering, right, it's a combination of software and hardware, and network lines and encryption and a whole bunch of other things, right? And so from a security perspective, as I mentioned, we're going through a SOC 2 audit, and so when I look at, how we measure that and how we measure success on that, right, that's really, we get audited regularly by several third-party companies on everything I'm telling you, and we make that data available to our end user customers so they can see how it's running, right? And so what's interesting is that there's a lot of different ways to look at, how we deliver our managed service, right, to this. Now, when we're talking about different customers in different locations around the world, I saw there was a question that came in around EU, outside EU, GDPR, because these rules tend to be very, very restrictive on data locality, right? And so if there's a reason, whether it's a government-imposed reason or an industry-imposed reason, to put a data in a particular location, in a particular country, in a whatever it is. Our technology fully supports that. We work with a set of network service provider partners around the world that are compliant. So, for example, in the EU, we've got service provider partners that are compliant with GDPR. So if you're concerned about the GDPR requirements, we do conform to those requirements when we operate in that market. If you're in the United States, we store data within the United States locally here. So we absolutely are very cognizant of data locality issues that looks like that. And so what's interesting is that we do tend to put data where it's requested. And so if there's a reason to keep data in a certain location, that's built into our service. Now, I saw a question come in around the network and what happens if something goes down. So that's a great question. By default, and this is something we do at every single customer site that we have, right, we actually put two separate Ethernet circuits, and these are private Ethernet circuits. Those are not internet lines. These are actually private Ethernet circuits that are point-to-point circuits. We put those in on behalf of our customers, and we always, in every customer environment, source them from two different providers. So say, for example, Cogent and Level 3, or Comcast and Verizon, or, pick any provider. It doesn't really matter to us who owns the fiber. We always choose at least two different providers. There's a number of reasons for that. The first one has to do with one of my, I don't know, call it favorite use cases, but it's something that happened to us early on in our company. Somebody with a backhoe actually came out and cut through a fiber line in downtown Boston, and they actually cut one of the internet provider links and the private links as well. Luckily for us, we were connected to a separate provider to our network, and so there was no downtime for our customers because that is everywhere we do an installation. We have at least two different network links from two different providers with geographically diverse fiber in the ground. So we have a group of network specialists that X-ray. They think about like X-raying the ground as to where the fiber is lined. So we actually do that automatically, and that is built into and is part of our managed service. So to answer and I saw about 5 questions come in, all on the network link. So hopefully I'm going to summarize this by answering all these questions at once. Yes, the network links are part of our managed service. The hardware is part of our managed service. The providers are always two different actual carriers, and not just two different carriers, but what we do is we actually go all the way to the last mile to ensure diversity up until at least the building. Sometimes you come into a building and there's like a single point in the building. That we can't do anything about that if that's a building restriction, but typically outside the building we can start getting two different providers and all that. In some cases in the building we can get two different patch panels, for example, and if we can, we will. But if there's only a single patch panel in a building, then that's out of our control. We will make the customer aware of that. But we go as far as we can with diversity to an end user building, right? So there's no VPN built into this. This is all a couple steps further than VPN. This is actual private Ethernet lines. So they're all point-to-point circuits that connect our service from our end user customers back into our data centers and then into our network, right? And so there's a whole big network diagram of how we do this. But basically, that's really what we're doing from a network perspective. So we're not expecting our customers to handle this. We do this on behalf of our customers. And there's a lot of reasons why we do that. It's part of our managed service provider for when we go ahead and do that, right? And so what's interesting about that is that, we have a lot of very specific network requirements when we do that, and so it becomes really interesting. And when I usually talk to customers about what to do with this, right, I've got folks that are trying this out online, so I did put up the free trial there, so that's something that you can go to our main website and click on sign up for a tryout. You can exactly do that online. No, it doesn't cost you anything. Click a couple of buttons, and we'll get in touch with you and schedule a time that actually works for you. And so it's really been interesting to see, the way to connect people into a network and what you can do when you're connected between the end user customer data centers and your own data centers. You can really handle a lot of security issues, a lot of performance issues, a lot of data transit issues because you own the network. And so that's really a core piece of our intellectual property, is owning all of those links there. So I think I'm not quite sure how I'm doing on time here, so I'm not sure if somebody will tell me to stop answering questions, so I know kind of still looking at this.
Great presentation, Mark. Let's see, about the time, I think we just have time for a couple more maybe quick questions. While we answer those, let me pop up this poll question. for the audience. Again, don't forget to sign up for the free trial or check out the free trial on the Clear Sky website. The question on the screen there is, would you like to be one of the first to learn more about the Clear Sky storage solution? So I'll just leave that up on the screen for those out there in the audience to answer while we do a couple more quick questions for you, Mark. Another question here is about, kind of where does it make sense? I mean, with companies who maybe have an aging storage area network, at what point does it make sense to make the move to Clear Sky Data? Are there certain use cases, or is it a certain amount of storage like capacity or in financial investment they're going to have to make in, say, replacing an aging SAN? Because I'm thinking that Clear Sky Data isn't just for the Fortune 100. How does it help kind of mid-market companies, and where do they make that decision?
Yeah, great question. So we have a 50 terabyte minimum for storage. I mean, we technically can go lower than that, but from a price point perspective, I would be less than honest if I told you we were price competitive. I mean, we have done those deals, but it starts to make sense around 50 terabytes on up. And there's a couple of main reasons for that, right? First is that, if you look at 10, 20 terabytes worth of data, what it takes to store that data, to back it up, to protect it, that's relatively inexpensive. And so, running Ethernet private lines, all the gear, everything we have to run and set up to make this service happen, economically, if I were on the other side of this decision and I were the customer, I wouldn't choose to go with us. But if you're looking at 50, 70, 100 terabytes, 200 terabytes, right, the cost to store that data, to back it up, and what's interesting is a restore cost, right, to actually pull it back, the time to restore or the economic restore if you're pulling it back from the cloud, all of those things all of a sudden start to say, wait a minute here, there's a real measurable value to what it takes to do that for whatever reason. Somebody lost a file, right? I need to restore a virtual machine. Oh crap, I got hit by a ransomware attack. That's where we start to see our value really take hold with customers. I hope that answers your question economically. There's other aspects, but I want to keep it short based on time.
Yeah, that's great. And then another question here is, do people treat Clear Sky Data as their primary storage solution? And if so, do they still have some sort of data protection solution, like we just talked about tape, with Veeam and IBM? Do they still have some sort of external data protection solution if this is primary?
That's a great question. The answer is that for folks that have been with us for a couple of years who really start to use all the value of Clear Sky, they use this for both primary and secondary storage. And what that means is that, you eliminate both the primary storage and the secondary storage and the backup software. Now, having said all that, do I expect any customer day one to not back up data on us or to trust us fully? No way. I wouldn't trust us fully. And I work here. And I've been here since before the beginning, right? And that's any new technology on the market. But what ends up happening with our customers, and what has happened in a few cases, is they start off with us in a test dev environment or a small VMware environment or a new application coming online or whatever it is, right? And, for me, it's okay, great. So you made an investment in pick your backup software, your whatever it is. Continue to run that for the next year because you already paid for it, so why not back it up, right? But when it's time to refresh that backup software or that whatever it is, now you've been running on Clear Sky for a year. You've seen we haven't gone down. You've seen that we have lots of copies. You've seen all that. Why spend the extra money on that? You don't need to, right? That's what tends to happen with our customer base, is that. So it tends to go that route more than don't get me wrong, I would love someone to just go with us day one and replace everything, but I'm realistic and nobody's going to do that, right?
Okay, great. I like the honest answer there. And it's great to hear how, customers who've been with you for a long time completely trust the solution and are able to simply use Clear Sky for all storage. So great presentation. Thanks for being on the event today, Mark.
Thank you.
All right, and thank you to Clear Sky Data for joining us. For more information, visit their website and also check out the resource there on your console. If you haven't answered the question on the screen, go ahead and quickly do it now because we are moving on. I'm excited to introduce the final presenter on today's Enterprise Storage Megacast. That is Mr. Alan Conboy, who is with the Office of the CTO. Alan, take it away.
Hi, thanks again, guys. I appreciate you having me back on to present here. So let me dive right into this. I'm not a sales guy. I'm Office of the CTO. My purpose in being here is just to give you a brief insight into what scale and HC3 and hyperconvergence really is. Now, that being said, quick background on the company. We formed the company officially formed the company back in about 2008, but we started putting a lot of thought into this a couple of years prior to that. We launched our HC3 hyperconverged product at VMworld back in 2012. And as an amusing side note, if you ever have the opportunity to launch an entire virtualization infrastructure, doing it with no VMware code of any kind, and do it at VMware's flagship show, do it. It's a lot of fun. You won't be invited back, but it's awfully enjoyable. Our DNA, realistically, is focused on radically simplified environment. More than anything else, a complete rethink of what virtualization should be. Now, I think maybe the best thing for me to say is where we got to this point from. You see, at scale, we had one major goal in mind. And what that was understanding why historically virtualization had been so complex, so expensive, why it was out of reach for a huge swath of companies out there, and what we could do to do it better. On our path to discovering these things, we came to a simple realization. x86, x64 virtualization, it was never something that was actually designed per se. It started life in the mid-1990s, if you will, as a science experiment of sorts. Could we take the concepts of virtualization from the old mainframe space and pull that into the x86 space? Now, that was accomplished. The good folks at VMware and others, they got that work done, and they did a fantastic job of it. Now, why was that done? Simple. Fewer servers, lower cost, get rid of some complexity, make computing more affordable for the world at large. The problem that lies therein is after the initial success back in the late 90s of getting virtualization out there, they started discovering problems, things like silo of storage problem. Well, if a box died, it didn't just take out the file and print server anymore. It took out every virtual machine running on it. There went file and print. There went the database. There went Exchange. Now, to solve that problem, shared storage got repurposed out of the highly available database space. Here came SAN and NAS, all of the associated protocols, all of the associated overhead and resource consumption. It solved the problem. It brought virtualization what's arguably its killer app. Live migration, fault tolerance, and HA. But it did it at a heck of a cost. All of the complexity and then some came roaring back. All of the cost and then some, again, came roaring back. You see, while it worked, and it worked really well, it was never designed. It was layers of onion and more layers. Every single advancement in the virtualization space from 99 to 2010, 2011, 2012 really was just answering the problems of the previous iteration. Never designed ever. Well, along comes HC3. What HC3 really is kind of a clean sheet of paper approach to how virtualization, with high availability, fault tolerance, actually should be done, how it should be architected from the ground up. Taking that killer app and all the benefits that virtualization brought, looking at that legacy inverted pyramid of doom of servers and switches and SAN and hypervisor from this guy and backup product from that guy, and thinking, okay, if we're going to build something from the ground up, should it look anything like that? The answer for us was, oh dear Lord, no. So what we've decided to do was architect a self-aware, self-healing, self-load balancing cluster where every single layer is built in from the ground up. We owned every single layer, the storage stack, the cluster orchestration stack, the hypervisor, everything, the DR componentry, and just build it all in. Eliminate the concepts of licensing and make it simple enough that you don't need to be a VCP and a CCNE and a SNIA certified storage engineer to stand up the architecture, make it go. Basically what HC3 is us delivering on the promise of giving companies an architecture that lets them not have to think about their architecture. A management experience even simpler than cloud. Easy enough to stand up that a 4-year-old can do it. That may sound like hyperbole, but it's not. They've got videos of a 4-year-old standing up an HC3 cluster, creating virtual machines, setting up DR, and doing live migrations. Most importantly, we really felt that virtualization should not come at a 1,600% plus price premium over the cost of the gear it runs on. Think virtualization for the real world, for everybody who isn't a Manhattan investment banker. So, with that being said, specifically, what is HC3? Well, as I mentioned, first and foremost, it's not VMware. There's no VMware code of any kind anywhere in the stack. It wasn't up to the task that we needed to build to do this the right way. HC3 replaces that entire legacy stack of servers, switches, SAN, hypervisor, DR componentry, everything. And it's done in such a way, with such a level of code efficiency, that it scales from the smallest of the small, edge computing running on an Intel NUC platform, to the largest data centers out there. Google GCP comes to mind. Its administration is radically simplified. It goes from taking it out of the box, sticking it in the rack, to running virtual machines, HA with live migration, setting up DR in less than 20 minutes. We've completely eliminated the entire concept of licensing. All features, all functionalities are simply included. Everything you expect to be there, all the table stakes you expect to see. Live migration, auto restart, DR failover, deduplication, etc. It's all there. We just don't play the silly games of, oh, you've got this much RAM or that many cores, we're going to charge you X number of licenses. We don't do that. Now, because we own every single layer of the stack, and we're not reliant on any other company here, that's allowed us to do some things that you don't see elsewhere. Things like 6,000 snapshots per virtual machine. They don't consume any additional space. They don't need to be reconciled ever. All of them directly clonable, startable, runnable. The entire DR stack just built in. And most importantly, we've solved the Moore's Law problem as well. See, with HC3, cluster-based, not only can you mix and match nodes from different node families to Lego bricks style meet the needs of your specific implementation, not just now, but as it grows, but you can mix and match across generations. That whole legacy of being boat anchored to the point in time that you acquire your architecture and having to rip and replace every 3 to 5 years, that goes away with scale too. Now, that was a lot of reinventing the wheel. A lot of it. Here's why. You see, the recipe for highly available virtualization hasn't changed much since the early 2000s. Step one was always figuring out what your workloads were going to be, what their IOPS, throughput, and capacity requirements were going to be, as well as core count, RAM footprint. Going and sourcing yourself a SAN to match those requirements. For the purposes of this discussion, it doesn't even really matter what that SAN device was, whether it was a NetApp or an Isilon cluster or a left-hand cluster, an EqualLogic box, an EMC VNX or VNXE or anything from IBM. Doesn't really matter. They all work more or less the same. You'd bring that guy in with the right number and type of drives and carve your RAID sets. Set up your protection space, your snapshot space. Now, the second you did that, either a file system or a pseudo file system got layered right across the top of those RAID sets. With the case of NetApp, it's Waffle. With Isilon, it's 1FS, so on and so forth. With pretty much anything ever from IBM, it was GPFS. Now, that file system, you didn't have to interact with it much. but it's where all of your advanced functionality set came from. It's also where all of the resource consumption of SAN, all that pile of cores and RAM that SAN uses, got dumped into. Well, your next step was to bring in your layer 2 switches, set up for MPIO, layer 2 data path. Bring in the management server, the discrete hypervisor hosts, bare metal your hypervisor of choice onto them, whether it's ESXi or Hyper-V or Rev or Zen, doesn't really matter. They'll, again, work pretty much the same way. Now, welcome to the end of day 3 in getting the infrastructure stood up. Well, starting day 4, you'd actually start creating the iSCSI LUNs to map out and get the infrastructure going. But if you ask yourself a simple question, what actually is an iSCSI LUN, the answer you might find is surprising. You see, what it really is a sparse file, an empty file, an object file that's mapped through that SAN vendor's iSCSI target code, shipped out across the network to the iSCSI initiators running on the individual hypervisor hosts and presented as a block device. Now, that's done in creating a concept known as a data store. Now, what actually is a data store other than a home for virtual hard drives, etc.? Well, long story short, it's a containerized object file. It's an empty file. It's a sparse file that gets its own file system. VMFS if we're talking VMware, NTFS if we're talking Hyper-V, ext3, ext4 if we're talking Rev or Zen. You see, at just this level, before you've created a single virtual machine, you are already dealing with a file system sitting on an object file mapped across a network fabric, sitting on an object file, sitting on a file system, sitting on a RAID set, coordinated through what? 4 separate kernels? But now it was finally time to stand up the reason that you've been building this architecture in the first place. Create your virtual machines. What actually is the first step in creating any virtual machine? It's creating the virtual hard drives, the VMDKs, the VHDs, VHDXs. What are they? They're empty files, sparse files. They're object files. Sitting on a file system, sitting on an object file, mapped across a network fabric, sitting on another object file, sitting on a file system, sitting on a RAID set. Well, then you could finally start installing your OSs to bring your applications online. And what's the first thing that happens when you install an OS? I'll give you a hint. The initials are NTFS. Yet another file system. You see, in the legacy approach to virtualization, and this is why we did so much reinventing the wheel with HC3, to do something as trivial as change a period to a comma. You're dealing with an open file, sitting on a file system, sitting on an object file, sitting on another object file, sitting on a file system, sitting on another object file, mapped across a network fabric, sitting on another object file, sitting on another file system, sitting on RAID set. And all of that layered on top of the overhead of IP, all of that layered on top of the overhead of storage protocols, and all of the above underpinned by RAID penalty. It's amazing to me this Rube Goldberg machine that we've all been using since, oh Lord, the late 1990s, early 2000s, ever worked in the first place. Well, not to oversimplify here, but with HC3, our mentality was very straightforward. Perfection is not attained when there's nothing left to add, but rather nothing left to remove. So it's in that spirit that we got rid of everything that didn't need to be there in the first place in that legacy, got rid of all of the layers of the onion, and put the remainder exactly where it needs to be. You see, with HC3, what we've created is an architecture that is fundamentally more efficient. An architecture that, to do that same change a period to a comma, instead of having to deal with 7, 8 hops coordinated through 4 or 5 separate kernels each way, does the same thing in 3 coordinated through a single kernel. Order of magnitude more efficient. Now, an HC3 implementation can actually start life with as little as a single node, 1. Most of our customer base starts with 3 or more. But what we're doing is fundamentally different. You don't see things like vCenter servers here or System Center virtual machine managers. We don't need them. See, we implemented a concept known as a state machine, a master process, if you will, that runs on each node. And the nodes talk directly to each other so that every node knows everything going on every other node as it happens in real time, making the cluster self-aware. Our storage stack, Scribe, we got rid of all of the file systems, every single one. The only file system there is the one inside the virtual machine. We create a single global namespace of disk from all the drives of all types in every node in the cluster, federate them together, route through round-robin chain declustering, every single block of data committed directly to two separate drives on two separate nodes in the cluster and federated across all. Fully dynamic, fully self-healing, fully self-aware. We took the time with those state machines to code in all of the if-thens. If you see this, do that. All the things that you as sysadmins had to deal with manually historically, the cluster knows what to do with and does automatically. So you don't have to think about it. Now, with HC3, there's a variety of node families, a variety of processor types for RAM footprints, node drive types, capacity points. We automatically set up tiering so you don't have to think about it. There's no such thing as a LUN because we're mapping blocks directly to individual virtual machines. No LUNs to create or grow or deal with. No storage protocols. We don't need them. Radical simplification. That's what hyperconvergence is really all about. Now, let's do this. Let's jump onto a running cluster. Talk about what it takes to get it there. Create some virtual machines and show off some of the really cool features that HC3 brings to the table. You know, a moment or two ago, we talked about what goes into legacy virtualization. Okay, standing that up. Let's talk now about what goes into standing up an HC3 cluster. You see, with an HC3 cluster, it's very straightforward. You take the nodes out of the box, stick them in the rack, cable up the Cat6 or the SFPs if you're going 10 or better gig. Okay? You hook up a KVM to the VGA port and USB port on the back of each node, apply power. Nodes come online, they ask you one question only. What are my IPs? Hand them out. When you get to the last node in the cluster after you've given it its IPs, you hit the initialize cluster button, disconnect your KVM, go grab yourself a cup of coffee or a Mountain Dew. Come back about 15 minutes later, point a browser at any one of the IPs you just handed out. You're up. Log in, drop in here to the settings tab, supply your environmentals, who to send alerts to, where to send syslogs, all the basics for the site. Jump right here to the media tab, drag and drop your ISO images in. Jump right here to user management, supply credentials for various administrators so we can track who's doing what to who for you. Jump right back up here to the main screen, carve yourself off your first VM. Hit the plus button. This couldn't be any simpler if it tried. Give your new VM a name. We'll call this one, say, 11 Alpha 1. Give it a functional description if you like. Maybe this is going to be a new SQL server. Tag it in with other groups of similar servers if you want. Don't have to if you don't want to. This is for doing things like sorting, searching, and bulk actions. Start all my databases, snapshot all my VDI instances. Here, we'll put this guy in with the application servers. It's going to be a Windows box. Tell us we slipstream the paravirtualized stack in for you. One less thing to have to live with. If it's going to be a Linux box, a BSD, any of those System 5s, well, guess what? There's nothing to add because our paravirtualized stack's been natively in those kernels since 2007. Tell us how many cores you want, what your RAM footprint needs to be, and of course you can change it all after the fact. How many and what size virtual hard drives? Here, let's do a 50 gig C drive, maybe a 75 gig logs drive, and say a 500 gig database drive. Tell us which ISO to boot from. We're done. Here, let's do a 2K8R2 instance. Create. That virtual machine has been created through the state machines. It's been instantiated on every node in the cluster. Every node knows about it. When I hit the Start button here on that virtual machine, you'll actually see those state machines in action. You see, that sends a signal through the node we're logged in on, in this case, node 1, propagates through the state machines to every node, saying this workload's ready to start. State machines do a current projected workload analysis and automatically determine where that workload should run. You don't even have to think about placement with HC3. Notice we're logged in through node 1. That workload got started on node 2. That was the best place for it to be. Console, it's a pop-up window. Already HA. Live migrations with HC3, they take seconds, not minutes. See, when you're not having to coordinate through a management server, when you're not having to deal with iSCSI ARB, ARB-Win, SCSI Reserve, SCSI Release, all of that legacy cruft, doing things with HC3 like live migrations is really just ship the running memory state across the back-end node to node. Now, creating a virtual machine, live migrating it around, those are all kinds of table stakes. Being able to dynamically put which workloads where you want them to be from an IOPS throughput and capacity perspective, handy. For example, I may not want my C drive and page file to be consuming any of the flash resources of this cluster. Slide them to 0, hit update. Dynamically on the fly, all his writes go just to the spinning disks. With the logs drive, I may want a bit of flash. Well, any value above 1 here. The writes go to flash, we automatically turn on our heat mapping engine, D-stage cool and cold stuff. Notice that this is a slider. This particular slider actually establishes the relative priority of this virtual hard drive versus every other drive on the entire cluster. What that does for you is simple. It allows you to say that this SQL instance is more important than that MP3 server from an I/O perspective. Now, here's where it gets even more fun. You see, we said this was going to be a database instance. Well, databases, they kind of live and die by IOPS and throughput. So the higher you set this value, the more that workload is just kept in flash, period. And yes, we did in fact borrow the naming conventions here directly from that Mel Brooks classic, Spaceballs. But in a nod to that true cult classic, this is Spinal Tap, please note, these go to 11. Now, all humor aside, there's a practical purpose to this. You see, when you set a virtual hard drive to 11, we turn off destaging, setting the workloads that need to be all flash, without having to buy all flash for your entire infrastructure. Now, don't get me wrong, we offer nodes, node families, and entire clusters that are all flash as well. But this puts control and cost control right back in your hands in a way that nobody else has ever done. Fully dynamic, hot and on the fly. Now, I/O control, simplicity, those things are great. DR, well, that's part of the equation too. You see, built in, any HC3 virtual machine has the ability, as I mentioned at the outset, to take up to 6,000 snapshots of himself. None of them consume any additional space. Yes, they are VSS integrated, the whole bit. Okay? That's no more complex than saying, give me a schedule. Well, okay. We'll pick this DR1 schedule. Creating a schedule, trivial. It's no more than come here to schedules, hit create. I'll show you what one looks like real quick. How often should we take snapshots? How long to preserve them? And how many schedules? Pretty straightforward stuff. Create them on the fly in a matter of minutes. But every HC3 VM also natively has the ability to replicate to any other HC3 target to which we have a route, whether that's a single HC3 node in a data center across town, an entire second site, or something else that I haven't talked about yet. You see, one of the things that we've done is simple. We've partnered with Google. Over the last 2.5 years, Google and Scale together have created something known as HC3 Cloud Unity. And what that is simply this. We make the entire resources of the Google Compute Platform appear via Layer 2 VXLAN overlay as a node on your network. makes it appear local, inheriting all of the native capabilities of HC3. For example, we created this virtual machine. We've started him. We've doing his install. We've set up DER. We've done live migrations. Now let's replicate him, and we'll replicate him to Google. Done. And in a matter of seconds, we'll do that initial seed, that initial sync, and on that schedule that we chose, do all those replications. You see what Cloud Unity does for you with HC3. It's very simple. It allows you to use cloud where it's appropriate, use on-prem where it's appropriate, and seamlessly move workloads back and forth, again, without having to be a PhD. For example, no more complex than simply this. Here, we'll take my production key management server that's up and running here locally on the cluster, right here. We'll shut him down hard. We'll jump right back over to Cloud Unity, data center, wherever. We'll replicate him and start him there. Equally importantly, replicate him back. Run workloads wherever it makes sense without the traditional Chinese finger trap of cloud, whenever it makes sense, with a simple button click. Oh, and by the way, guess what's already up there as well? That's seamless. And that's HC3. See, HC3 starts life at price points nobody else can touch. As little as $7,000 is a place to start. Let me jump back into here and show you some of those things. Replication, just built in. We talked about that. Price points across the board. Unlike everybody else, we put our prices right out there. Now, admittedly, these are list prices. These are before you play the, poke the sales guy in the eye and steal his wallet game. But this should give you some kind of scope of what we're talking about, ranging from a single node, an IoT edge computing endpoint, all the way up to Google and everywhere in between, done at a price point made specifically for the real world, for real budgets, where you don't need to be a virtualization expert. So in summation, maybe it's easier to say what you don't need with HC3. There is no VMware. There's none of the licensing. There's none of the, you want to use this, write us a check for that. There's no licensing of any kind. There's no SAN. There's none of the resource consumption that SAN sucks up. There's none of the complexity of SAN and storage protocols and initiators and firmware updates that run afoul of each other. For the last 2 decades, we've had to deal with that. Well, not with scale. There's no management servers of any kind. We completely eliminated that. The nodes talk directly to each other, radically simplifying the environment. You go from needing to have 2, 3, 4 guys dedicated to managing virtual infrastructure to one guy a couple hours a week. Again, not hyperbole. I've got thousands of customers happy to say the exact same thing. End of the day, no PhD required. Virtualization you don't have to think about that has all the feature functionality you expect with none of the drama. That's scale.
Great presentation, Alan. Very, very cool demo. Lots of good questions, lots of good feedback coming in from the audience. Someone said, this looks amazing. I have to get more info. A couple other people said they love the Spaceball Spinal Tap references. So kudos on that. We have a few questions here I'd like to ask you from the audience.
Sure.
While I do that, let me pop up this poll question for the audience, and that is, would you like to be one of the first to learn more about the scale computing hyperconverged storage solution? And so I'll just leave that up. If you want more info, just click sure on that. And while we do so, let me ask Alan a few questions. So, Alan, let's see here. First one is, how about Mike? He's asking, when you have a node go out and then it comes back online, whether replaced or repaired, how does Scale, basically do the VMs run smoothly while the cluster is being caught back up?
Absolutely they do. As a matter of fact, if I had been thinking about it, I could actually show that to you in real time. It depends on whether you want to spend 3 or 4 minutes. And if you want to see it, hit that button to ask for more info, and we'll take some time out of the band of the Megacast here. I'll do some live cord pulls. You can watch nodes go up in smoke. Other nodes simply grab their workloads, cycle them to RAM consistency, and keep everything going. Workloads running on the other nodes, totally unaffected. And you can see it yourself. Happy to show you.
Excellent. Another question is about data protection. How do you do data protection on your Scale virtual machines? I guess Google Cloud replication is one option, but what do you recommend, Alan?
When you say data protection, that can mean a whole lot of different things. That can mean anything from tertiary backup to how are we protecting individual data blocks to data in flight between the two. And I'm happily have answers for all of the above. Not to dive too deep here, just to be cognizant of everybody's time, every block of data is actively committed to a minimum of 2 separate drives on 2 separate nodes in the cluster. All writes are round-robin chain declustered across all of the drives in all of the nodes, a concept you might know as wide striping, okay? So that no matter which drive goes up in smoke at any point in time, everything's still there up and running. Now, this concept expands itself to include any node in the cluster can go up in smoke. The other nodes in the cluster, their state machines say, hey, that guy isn't responding. They kick him out. They already know which virtual machines have been running on him. They already have a full copy of all data blocks associated with those VMs. We pop them over, cycle them for RAM consistency, and up they come. Less than 3 minutes, and you don't have to think about it. Node dies, pull it out, we ship you the replacement. It's that simple. Stick the replacement in the rack, hit the power button, walk away. We'll catch him up on what changed while he was out of commission, out of band, across that back-end node-to-node subnet. You don't have to think about it. Now, if you're talking more about data protection in flight, compliance, encryption, that sort of thing, well, we've got answers there too. We've got a fantastic recently announced partnership with WinMagic, fully vetted and able to handle all of the encryption, key management, etc., with HC3, but made it completely portable. Key management can run up in the cloud, on-prem, inherits all of the portability that HC3 brings to the table, but makes it simple and cost-effective. If you're talking about traditional or legacy backup approaches, well, we obviously built most of that functionality just in, and we don't charge anything extra for it. But if you're anything like I was when I was a sysadmin, extra layers of protection, they matter. We're partnered with Unitrends. We're partnered with Acronis. We're partnered and vetted by most backup vendors out there.
Excellent. Excellent. Another question here is about would my Microsoft SQL and or Oracle databases be able to run on Scale?
Can they run? Absolutely. And I have hundreds of customers doing exactly that with Oracle and thousands doing that with SQL. Runs beautifully. Okay.
Another question is about VDI.
Sure.
Would Scale work well for VDI?
Absolutely. We do VDI through multiple different partnerships. Okay. Solutions that are blessed and fully integrated, including in computing, including WorkSpot, Citrix certified, got the little label sticker if you want it, the whole bit.
Cool. And then I think the final question we have time for is, how would you move from an existing VMware environment to Scale? Are there any tools, or what's the process?
Absolutely. And matter of fact, that was something else we wanted to radically simplify too. my background as a sysadmin here kind of shines through, and I remember what it was like doing a P2V or a V2V. You know, the legacy there historically was I got to set a Saturday on fire for every server I wanted to move. It was horrible. Step one was do a full backup of the server in question, okay, out to tertiary storage after taking him out of service. So the data was quiesced. Spinning up my new virtual machine, doing a full restore into that guy, injecting my VirtIO drivers, my para-virtualized driver stack, hoping everything worked, and literally forgetting a Saturday, everyone I wanted to move. Well, with Scale, I wanted to do something very different. So what we've done there is we offer something called HC3 Move. See, it's an agent-based approach. Let's say that you've got a VMware implementation running a 2K8R2 server with SQL. It's up in production doing its thing. You want to move that over to HC3. Your new HC3 cluster arrives. You take the 20 minutes or so to stand it up. Over on that production ESX box, on that 2K8R2 instance, you install the HC3 Move agent. Okay? It inserts itself at the SCSI layer and at the network layer. Does not require a reboot. SQL stays up the entire time. Over on your HC3 cluster, you carve yourself off a little shell virtual machine, the target, if you will. Throw a base copy of 2K8R2 on it, because that's what's running on the source, and a copy of the agent. Don't bother with domain joins or application adds or any of that. You bring up the Move user interface, select the source, select the target, hit Move. Now bear in mind, SQL stays up running, doing column and row inserts and transactions the entire time. But that ESX VM starts mirroring all of its registry entries, all of its directory structures, and all new I/O as it happens across the wire into the same locations on that HC3 VM, silvering up that mirror. Once that mirror is silvered, it comes back to you and says, hey, ready to fail over. At your convenience, hit the Fail It Over button. Does a graceful shutdown on that source ESX or Hyper-V or Rev or Zen or physical server, doesn't matter. Simultaneously reboots that HC3 VM, which comes up, rolls in its registry changes, rolls in any open files. Migration done. Total outage window, length of time of a reboot, about 3 minutes. I'll take that over a Saturday any day of the week.
All right. Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your great presentation and demo today, Alan. Thanks for being on.
Happy to do it. Look forward to talking to you guys again.
Excellent. There's a few questions left for you there in the queue if you want to check those out. And for everyone out there in the audience who would like to learn more about Scale Computing, of course, visit scalecomputing.com. Now it's time for our final grand prize giveaway. We have 3 Amazon $1,500 gift cards and an Amazon $500 gift card to give away. So grand prize number 3 for an Amazon $1,500 gift card is going to Richard Baya from California. Another $1,500 gift card going to Danny Hampton from Kansas. Another $1,500 gift card going to Matt Travakalian from Georgia. And an Amazon $500 gift card is going to Dave Steinmetz from California. We'll post all of those out in the Q&A as well as on Twitter. Those are the final prizes for the event today. I want to point out to everyone out there, we do have an excellent podcast called the 10 on Tech podcast. You can subscribe on iTunes. We interview innovative technology professionals around technology solutions like we talked about today. So I hope that you'll check that out. And I hope that you'll also join us for our next event, which is coming up next year, not 2017, but 2018, on January 10th of 2018. It's going to be the Enterprise Cloud Megacast event. Watch your email box for an invitation to that event, and also visit events.actualtechmedia.com to register for that event and learn about all of our events that we do throughout the year. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Enterprise Storage Megacast. I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.